and let's go live. We're connecting and we are going. I'm gonna assume gone. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, is it going? Hi, how y'all doing? You having a lovely Sunday? I'm a little bit late. Once again. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I start every single stream the exact same way. There's always more wheels that I gotta churn in order to get this thing started. I always forget about it every single time. I'm a little bit forgetful that way. But how is everybody doing? I just first of all want to thank the Dungeon Delver for the hot little $5 tip there. An hour ago before I'd even started. So that's dedication. What that is. Thanks very much, Dungeon Delver. He says, I love the new RPG focus you've got going. How about some love for classic D&D for an old grognard this morning? A lot of love. You know what arrived recently for me? No, it's not Dungeons and Dragons, but it is the Fantasy Trip. If anybody's heard of the Fantasy Trip, the old Legacy edition simply arrived very, very recently. I have played the Fantasy Trip before, but I have, where is it? It's here. It's this bad boy. This just arrived in the Labyrinth. So I haven't read through it just yet, but I'm very excited. This is from like 1977, not the book. It's a reprint. I think it was kickstarted recently, but it's from like 1977. So you can't get more classic than that, can you? Well, I suppose you could go 3 years earlier and get the original D&D, but I mean, like, come on, who's keeping count here? But but thank you very much, Dungeon Delver. I really do appreciate that. I haven't played. I haven't played any of the like old school, like, I mean, I guess I have played a bunch of OSR stuff, but I haven't played like a ton of them at all. I'd like to try more. I always end up getting roped into GURPS games is kind of how it rolls. Just realized I don't have my audio on. I forgot about my headset. There you go. That's how excited I am to get started today. We got a lot to talk about. Big topic, Dungeons and Dragons. What is going on with that, okay? Like, because I don't know. It seems like it's blowing up. If you looked at the thumbnail, there was a little explosion. It's that kind of clever wordplay that people come to me for. Let's see here. So, Helsente says, talk about Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I do not think I'll be talking about that game. I was going to say anytime soon, but I don't know if I'll ever be talking about that game. Something has gone awry if I end up talking about Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Luke Adele says, hark, methinks. Hey there, Luke. Jason says, lots of choices. You don't need Wizards of the Coast, and you never did. Be free. Well, I mean, strictly kind of true, right? Kind of true. This is actually something I wanted to touch on today. We might talk about it a little bit later, about the role and purpose of the open game license. One of the big comments that I hear about these days is that game designers don't require the open game license in order to publish games because you can't copyright mechanics. And I have a take on that. I have a big opinion on that, but we're gonna touch on that later, because I actually think that the open game license is actually really important, regardless of whether you can or cannot copyright mechanics. You can't, but we're gonna touch on it later. Steph says, I'm glad the LARPing is my main hobby, though it's more limited this time of year. You know what? I have always wanted to LARP. This is something I've always wanted to do. I've like had this dream for the last like 10 years that I want to LARP. I want to go to a field somewhere and I want to play political games over nation states and borders that don't matter. I mean, that's basically what we do in Northern Ireland anyway. But I really want to do that. Like, I really want to do that. I really want to say, hark, thou foul beast! Thine has crossed too far, and my blade he shall taste. And I want to do that. And then I want to get defeated in a duel, and then arise again as an evil lich. I mean, come on. That is a weekend. Get really drunk and start duels that you can't finish. I'm looking forward to that idea. I really want to do that. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to like find a group. It also seems to require a lot of time commitment, and also I'm really bad at costuming. You guys have seen my costumes in like the little skits I do on the channel. They're not professionally made. Let's put it that way. I see some people out there, like Ginny D, for example, who do these incredible cosplays. I'm over here with like my clown outfit that consists of a wig that I owned already. Don't ask me why. And basically just a clown costume. I can't do much better than that. That's basically like my limit. Maybe one day I'll like really get the grips with it. King of Horror says, censored word. My first stream. Well, hello there, King of Horror. Welcome to the channel. Roll for Combat says, hey there, busy weekend. It is very busy, let me tell you. It is very busy. Right now, I think a lot of lawyers, specifically in the field of copyright law, have been making a lot of money over the last week too. So we're all digging for it. Christopher Plummer says, let's see here. Phil Urbanus says, like the stream, everyone. And Cython says hello. So yes, thank you, both of you guys. Let's see. Happy New Year and thanks for the background while my hobby says Win. Hello there, Win. No problem at all. Evolution of Game says that Wizard of the Coast kidnap her to keep her quiet. I mean, they could try. This is certainly something that I'm definitely aware of. That's why I've got my big Fraser behind me there, so that anyone who's watching thinks that I've got a goon, you know, hired goons. Oh, let me just trip on the noise here. Looks like we got a donation there. Let's see here. Mac Attack 01, thank you very much for the $5 donation. Says, considering the frustration throughout the community, do you think Critical Role is going to stick with D&D? Check out Reckoning LARP April 25th. I'll check out that Reckoning LARP. Okay. So Critical Role is a really interesting one, right? Critical Role, for those who don't know, I mean, I'm going to explain it really briefly because I assume most people know. Critical Role is an actual play stream that play a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, right? Matthew Mercer. It's really super popular. Got millions and millions and millions of viewers. One of the top Twitch streams. Massive organization. One of the top Twitch streams. Massive organization. Now, obviously, they have released content for Dungeons & Dragons. Like, Matthew Mercer has written content for Dungeons & Dragons, also under the Open Game license. I think they've done a setting supplement, but they've also worked directly with Wizards of the Coast to release some of those. I actually think that some of them might have been bespoke licensing agreements that probably were, like, Wizards probably got some money off of them. So obviously, Critical Role have been a massive aspect of Dungeons & Dragons becoming a cultural juggernaut over the last, like, 3, 4, 5 years. A part of it, not the only bit, I mean, but a big part of it. It's been very, very popular. Amazon does, like, an animated show now that shows off a bunch of the Critical Role stuff. So it's really, really big. Definitely penetrated the mainstream. And from what I understand, Critical Role were actually... So Matthew Mercer was already working on his own TTRPG. He was already working on his own setting. Now, here's the thing. I think that with the Open Game license, as it is, if nothing had happened, right? If the last week hadn't occurred and everything was just chugging along normally, I think we could have seen a scenario where Matthew Mercer releases his new TTRPG and it does okay, and maybe it doesn't do like gangbusters, and they go back and they still continue to play Dungeons and Dragons. I think that probably would have been a pretty likely scenario. But now, it doesn't matter how successful his TTRPG is, I think. I think no matter what happens, they all move over to that new TTRPG, because Wizards of the Coast, and even if Wizards of the Coast walk back what they've done, okay, so even if the leaks about the Open Game license is incorrect, I think even in that instance, they will still move over to their own TTRPG, because it is too risky to be operating in the sphere of Dungeons and Dragons right now. Not when there's like millions on the line. It's either that or they negotiate a bespoke relationship with Wizard of the Coast that minimizes the amount of royalties they'll have to pay. So I think that actually this is probably a good, because I want to kind of give an overview of what's going on before we really start to talk about, before I start answering questions, because I think there's some people out there who probably are still a little bit confused as to what's going on. I think there's a lot of misconceptions that are happening in the community about what the Open Game license is, what the new one means, what happens to existing companies like Paizo and Pathfinder. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And I'm actually, so I've recently filmed a video on this, and it will be coming out early next week, basically going over what's happening, what will happen next, because some people might not know, but I actually am a lawyer, or was at least. So I do have some knowledge of this, and I was a contract lawyer too. So I have some degree of knowledge about this. Now, I did not specialize in IP law, but I've been reading around the subject, right? So I have a little bit of an idea. So that video is going to be kind of an analysis of what's occurring and what's going to happen next, and what I think is the likely kind of answer to a lot of questions the community has. But I want to do like a very, very brief overview of what the fuck is going on with Dungeons and Dragons right now, because it is really, really, really blowing up. It's gone wild. Like this is one of the big, this is history, okay? So whenever you hear about people talking about, like, you know, TSR buying out things, whenever you hear about 4th edition and things blowing blowing up and the rise of Pathfinder. This is one of those moments. This is one of those moments where in 5 years' time, they're going to talk about what's happening right now. And they're going to talk about the change to the open game license and how this all went crazy, okay? So here's the deal, all right? I'm going to give a brief overview, and then I'm going to go back to your questions and answer some of those. So first of all, really simple, all right? The Dungeons & Dragons has what is known as an open license, and they've had this since the year 2000, okay? This was the 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. And the open gaming license, this is the OGL that everyone is talking about. The OGL 1.0, the open game license, is a guarantee, essentially, from Wizards of the Coast saying that they will not sue you if you build a game or a supplement or a character class that is compatible explicitly with Dungeons & Dragons. That's it. It's an open license. It has some terms, but nobody needs to actually know most of those, okay? Now, Wizards are currently updating the open license for 1D&D. They're updating the open license going forward for the new version of Dungeons and Dragons. And it is really, really bad. I mean, that's a little bit of editorializing for me, but I've not heard a single person say anything good about this open game license. And I'm talking lawyers, I'm talking industry veterans, I'm talking existing third parties. Nobody has a kind word to say about it. Anybody who has a kind word to say about it is being silent, because there's only a couple people who are just not mentioning any words at all. Okay. So what are some of the bad things about this new open gaming license? Firstly, I think one of the big deals is that it gives Wizards access to the books and numbers of their competitors. Essentially, if you want to release any sort of content under the open gaming license, then you have to register your supplement with Wizards of the Coast. It doesn't matter how much money you're going to make, you still have to register it with them as per the terms of this new agreement, okay? That's pretty bad. Anyone making over $750,000 also has to pay Wizards a 25% royalty fee, okay? Now, that $750 is coming from gross revenue. That's not profit. So this means this is now an additional cost that you will incur if you go over $750,000. Now, $750,000 is a lot of money, okay? There's very few people that are actually getting over that amount. But it's still a pretty crazy amount of royalties, especially when you think about the like Kickstarters, for example. Now, Kickstarter has actually negotiated the new OGL already to reduce that amount to 20%. But I can envision a scenario where a Dungeons and Dragons supplement is built and it's crowdfunded on Kickstarter, and it accidentally becomes too successful. It becomes too successful, and they hit over the threshold, 750,000, and suddenly there's this additional 25% cost that comes out of nowhere, okay? So that can be a little bit of an issue. Also, the new license has a termination notice of 30 days to Wizards. What this means is that Wizards can issue a termination of that license to the third party, and all they have to give is 30 days notice. That's a very short period of time. Very, very short. And finally, this is probably arguably the worst. Wizards get a license to publish the content of that third party who signs it, and they don't have to pay the third party anything. Basically, the third party has to agree, signing up to these new terms, that Wizards will be allowed to license off the content, to use the content, to sell the content and make a profit off it. The third party has to agree to that. These are all bad terms. Now, we haven't seen the actual full document itself yet. It has only been leaked to certain groups, and I would say that okay, so everyone who it's been leaked to has been consistent in what it's saying, firstly. Secondly, there's been industry veterans that were already hinting that this is what it was looking like because there was already a version floating around. Thirdly, it is journalists who have this, not like, you know, some random YouTuber. These are like journalists who I would say are pretty reliable sources. Okay, so this is all pretty bad. Now, this is obviously for 1D&D. Okay, this is the new gaming license, open gaming license for 1D&D. And that's really bad. But one of probably the worst bit, the scariest bit, which is why everyone is going nuts, is that Wizards appear to not only be trying to change the license for 1D&D, but they also seem to be trying to make it retroactive. Essentially, they're trying to replace the previous license that was like originally issued out in the year 2000, and they're trying to replace that with this new license. They're trying to close the previous license and get everybody onto this new license. Now, whether they can do that or can't do that is really technical, and there's a lot of disagreement in terms of the language that is used in the licensing, and my video next week will be on that topic. It will actually be on that topic, on what the arguments are on both sides, okay? So, check that out. That'll be on the Dungeons and Discourse channel. For those who don't know, I've got an RPG channel called Dungeons and Discourse. I'll be releasing that. Now, personally, my personal opinion is I think they probably can. I think they probably can make it retroactive, but that will likely be contested in a courtroom. Now, what this means is that games like Pathfinder, OSR games, all of them, they are going to arguably be captured by this new licensing agreement. This new update. Now, obviously, they haven't signed up to the new terms. They have to agree to the new terms, but they won't be covered by the previous open game license if Wizards of the Coast get their way. So, what that means is they either have to agree to the new terms, all those new terms that are really bad, or risk getting sued if they continue to publish games that are compatible with Dungeons and Dragons that originally would have been covered by the open gaming license. That means Pathfinder, as it exists right now, could arguably cause Paizo to get sued by Wizards of the Coast unless they agree to sell Pathfinder under the terms of the new license. This is the big problem. This is why everyone is going nuts. So what Wizards appear to have done is they've cultivated this space where third-party creatives have begun to sell all these supplements, build all these games for Dungeons and Dragons. And now, Wizards are beginning to harvest. They want their money. And people are understandably really annoyed. I mean, the open gaming license was sort of meant to be a good faith agreement. And yeah, that really sucks. So that's the scenario as it is right now. Everybody is basically losing their mind because it feels really, really unfair. So that's where we are. As it is right now. Hello there, Core Afternoon Discourse in chat says, Core, hello there. George said, I saw the boom graphics. Solid. Exactly, right? Exactly. Hello from Taiwan, says Chan Hussein Chu. Hello there. Sorry, I probably butchered your name. Mac Attack. Let's see here. Thank you for the donation there. Yes, Reckoning LARP, April 25th. I'm gonna bang that in one little second. LARP 25th. There we go. Sorry, I had to write that down in case I forget it. Thunder Delver says, Discourse, you and Sister Battle cosplay when? I have never, the moment I get an outfit, I don't have one. Let's see here, Protomat says, hi Discourse, first time I managed to catch the live stream. Hello there, Protomat, welcome to the live streams. Sinner Live says, finally catch one of your live streams, Discourse. Hello there, Sinner Live. Is this a good time for people then? Is this a good time then? Vincent says, don't let people named Williams be in charge of D&D. I mean, that feels like discrimination against the name Williams, right? Williams is a good name. Wizard of the Coast and Hasbro says Josh White are gonna get too greedy and all the old heads will stop playing. However, that'll leave a lot of new players who don't have better in their sights. Agreed. So, I think that at the end of this, when this all shakes out, I think that the bigger companies are probably going to be okay. I think your Paizo is probably going to be okay. Critical Role, MCDM, all these bigger companies are going to be okay because they can move on to their own systems and they have enough market share and they have enough kind of IP and customers and loyalty to just move on to another system. If Critical Role build their own TTRPG, I think they'll probably be okay. Now, I think that's going to hurt their growth. For sure, that's going to hurt their bottom line, but they will survive, and that's kind of important right now. That we're in a moment, we're in the ark, people. We're in the ark. The water is rising. It's at our knees. And only a couple of people are getting on board. Their names are on the list. But there's a lot of third parties who rely on the brand recognition of Dungeons and Dragons. They rely on being able to say that their game is compatible with Dungeons and Dragons because Dungeons and Dragons has a massive, what you would call, installed user base. It is a huge population of players that it gives access to. And third-party, smaller indie developers, they need access to those customer base. Otherwise, people won't play them. There's this weird culture in TTRPGs where trying to learn a new system, and it's weird for me as a wargamer, okay? As someone who invests like so much money in these little plastic soldiers and then goes on and plays another game and has to learn a whole new rule system, there's this culture in TTRPGs where people are kind of reluctant to learn new systems. I think this is the bane of dungeon masters everywhere, is they want to try a new system and the players are always like, let's just continue you to play Dungeons and Dragons. And this might cause a lot of those people to play new games, but I think equally there'll be a lot of people who just want to stay and play Dungeons and Dragons. They just want to stay and play Dungeons and Dragons, and that might even be 5th edition. But one of the issues of this new 1.1 Open Gaming License update is that it seems Wizards' intention is that the new Open Game License will cover 5th edition as well. So if all you want to do is make compatible with 5th edition content, you're gonna have to sign up to these new terms. So those third parties won't have a lot of options otherwise, which is a really rough scenario for them to be in. Let's see here. Alex Tavern says Pathfinder 1E is just D&D 3.75. Yeah, we used to always call it 3.5. You know, I actually played Pathfinder before I played Dungeons and Dragons. My first experience with Dungeons and Dragons was Pathfinder because I came in, I played Dungeons and Dragons. Well, I played Pathfinder at that time. I think it was around 2007, 2008 at that time. Oh, thank you very much for the donation there. Sean, thank you very much for the 14 Canadian dollars. Says, please note that can ask 12 lawyers for an opinion and get back 18. Seen a discussion between 3 lawyers on the new OGL and they all disagreed. Original Open Gaming License was poorly written. Too many lawyers. Thank you very much for that, Sean. I totally agree. So, like I said, in my personal opinion, I think that Wizards probably can retract it, but there is different people are disagreeing. What this means, okay? Sean is totally right. Lawyers disagree. This is the issue. There is no answer right now. Nobody knows what Wizards can and can't do. Lawyers are disagreeing with one another. There is an answer to this. There's usually a solution to this problem, and the solution is a courtroom. This is what it's going to take. For us to get a definitive, can Wizards do or not do this, it's going to need to go to a courtroom. Now, I know a lot of lawyers will be going, oh, they'll be rubbing their palms together for the knowledge of that, because this is going to be an expensive proposition. I think we are going to see court action. I think we're going to see it either from a class action lawsuit from a number of different third-party interests. We're already seeing open legal letters get written by a number of different publishers, or we're going to see a bigger company go out on their own, someone like Paizo, who can afford to take litigation against Wizards of the Coast, and it's gonna need to shake out in a courtroom. That is the only answer that we have right now. That is the only way that this gets resolved. That or Wizards walk it back. That is the secret answer. Wizards of the Coast could walk back all of this, and they should, in my opinion. Right now, it is a leak. That gives them deniability. They can redress some of these concerns and basically walk it back and come up with a new version that's not as onerous, but will probably still be worse than the existing terms. Now, I know I've seen people mention that Wizards of the Coast do this very frequently in Magic the Gathering. For sure. Mac Attack, thank you very much for the $5 donation. Says, who amongst the industry has the deep pockets to challenge Wizard of the Coast / Hasbro in court? Or will they the will to invest the time, i.e. years? Because Mac is right. This will be a very expensive and lengthy court proceedings. We're at the we are at the very beginning of a big road here. So who amongst, I think Paizo could probably challenge it. I think that there are some bigger companies, maybe even Kobold Press. They're pretty big. Now, the problem is, for those bigger companies, is that it's possible that what could happen is Wizards of the Coast could simply agree to negotiate the terms of the Open Gaming License, a bespoke license with those bigger groups. And that is kind of dangerous, where you pick out your strongest opponents and you negotiate slightly better terms for them, which then makes it, like there's less of a win for them to go into courtroom. And that kind of screws over all the little guys, because the bigger companies then are like, okay, sure, we'll come to an agreement. Now, I think alongside this, we're probably going to see 3.0 Pathfinder be completely unrelated to the Open Gaming License for Dungeons & Dragons and just shed all of that completely. Because this is something Wizards of the Coast have shown. They've shown that because they're willing to change it in this way, this is awful for most businesses that rely on the Open Gaming License. This is terrifying. Now that Wizards have shown that they're willing to make these sorts of moves, there was a level of stability emerging from the original Open Gaming License. Everybody was comfortable with it. It was a good faith agreement. People thought that it couldn't change. Now that Wizards have shown that they may be willing to change it in a really deep, dark, scary way, in a kind of Mordor-esque way, I think that we're going to see more of a movement away from it. Thank you for the donation, Daniel Gallen, for the 15 Canadian dollars. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Really helps out the channel. Andrew Mentos donated $5. Says, do you like OSR systems or other RPG games you like to play? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So I was mentioning the fantasy trip just at the beginning there. I recently picked up the fantasy trip. I'm a big fan of GURPS. I'm a big fan of GURPS. Now, I don't run GURPS. I usually play in GURPS. As I'm a player. I'm the DM who runs GURPS for me, knows everything about the system. So I just let them worry about that. And then I just know about my character. So I really like that. But I play a lot of... the first RPG I played was Dark Heresy, which is a D100 game. It was for Warhammer 40k. That was the first game I ever played. I'm still a big fan of that. I really like the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay game as well. Just last night, I played Mothership for the first time. That was a ton of fun. If you've never played it before, I really recommend that. Mothership is really awesome. Now, I want to play more OSR systems. I haven't played a ton of them. I have played some kind of D&D adjacent style of games, like Shadow of the Demon Lord. I'm a big fan of that. But I haven't played a lot of OSR games. But I want to get into more. I think recently I've been playing Legends of the Five Rings, which obviously isn't an OSR game. But I think after that we might be trying Morkborg, which I'm looking forward to trying that too. So yeah, I'm pretty well. I play a lot of RPGs, basically. I play a lot of them. I've been in a pretty consistent game from 2007, I think, around then, 2008, up to today, where we would meet. There was at one stage in my life I was playing 3 games a week, so I play a lot of TTRPGs for sure, and I play D&D, but not as like frequently, I think, as some groups who just play only D&D. Chapter House fought despite it killing them, says Vincent. Yes, exactly. So you might get third parties, like smaller companies that go in. There are advocacy groups out there that will provide legal advice, that will represent smaller companies for free. Basically, pro bono. Now, the issue with that is that even if that's the case, I think that could be likely in the sense that there's actually a lot of publicity that's coming into this now. There's been a lot of talk about about all of this. It's kind of blowing up right now, even in kind of popular media. I'm seeing mainstream press outlets catch this as well, which is, thank you very much for the donation there. The King of Horror says, have you heard of the TTRPG Vessin? I have heard of it, but I don't know anything more than that. The King of Horror, though, is it a horror game? Because I absolutely adore horror. I actually didn't mention it, but Call of Cthulhu is one of my favorite TTRPGs. I'm a big fan of it. I've heard of Vessin, but I haven't played it at all. But thank you very much for the donation. I really appreciate that. Nadine Marcus says, I believe this leak is accurate. Me too. I honestly, I really do believe that it's accurate. It seems, it really passes the smell test for me. We've had multiple sources saying that this is the case. I actually suspect that this was leaked. Some people have suggested that Wizard of the Coast had probably leaked this on purpose as like a little bit of a tester to see how well it would go down. I don't think so. I think it was probably a disgruntled employee who's seen this and doesn't like the idea of it. You gotta remember that the original open gaming license was kind of a piece of idealistic terms. It's very good. It's very open, you know? It's a part of the culture of role-playing games where you open up these licenses to the community. Wizard of the Coast, Dungeons & Dragons, they're not the only game system with an open gaming license. Chaosium has one as well. Pathfinder have their own open gaming license. This is a part of the culture of role-playing games. It's about the collaborative nature of these games. Mechanics are shared. Game systems are shared. I mean, this ultimately, as a kind of hobby, as a role-playing game, as a hobby, it's not a very cynical one, honestly. It's not a super profitable one either. It's always been one born of passion. And to see that kind of change now from Wizards of the Coast, they go from being a company that cares about the hobby into one that now is seeking to try and maximize profit no matter the cost. It's indicative of the future. I think that people called some of my videos about about 1D&D as kind of alarmist, but I don't feel like it was. I feel like I was just trying to express what the future of Dungeons & Dragons looked like if we were to take Wizards of the Coast at their word. And what they have said is they want to squeeze monetization as much as possible. They want to make the games look more like the monetized games of video games. And if you look at what video games look like, I mean, it's pretty much a hellscape. And that is the future. The moment that they think that they can squeeze that amount of money out, well, they're sort of incentivized to do so, aren't they? Sean says, this move is likely driven twofold by the new management who come from Microsoft and the recent shareholder pressure to extract more value from Dungeons & Dragons. I totally agree, Sean. I totally agree. Thank you very much for the donation there. Mac Attack says, I want to thank you for turning me on to one-page rules. I just recently got their Age of Fantasy and Grimdark. Very cool, so thanks. Well, thank you very much, Mac, for the donation. And I'm really glad to hear that, because one-page rules is really fun if you're someone who's interested in Warhammer, but maybe there's too much going on, One Page Rules is an awesome alternative. The rules are totally free. You can check it out totally free. Their monetized system is they have a Patreon. You can support them on Patreon. You get like an extended version of the rules, and also they sell STLs on My Mini Factory. But the game system is kind of custom made so that you can play Warhammer but without half as much of the fuss. I find it a very playable, very fun experience. It's probably my favorite game out of 2022. But I'm glad that you found it, Makatan. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Johnny Idiot says the leak is probably from someone who hates Hasbro. Probably. I mean, like, not everyone's going to be on board with this. Ryan Dancy, one of the original creators of the Open Game License from the year 2000, from the Great Millennium, he did say that the original intention of the Open Gaming License was that it could not be changed in the future. So his intention was that it couldn't be changed in the future. The problem is, well, they didn't write it that way, unfortunately, I think. Ty Lisana, thank you very much for the donation, says, we have to remember this. No amount of walking this back changes it was what they considered. They will wait and try again. I totally agree. Now, I've seen this a lot from publishers, like video game publishers like EA, and I've heard, so I'm not super into Magic the Gathering. I know some people who play it up and kind of adjacent to it, but I've heard that this happens a lot in the Magic the Gathering. The Wizard of the Coast will do something, the community will have an outcry, they'll walk it back slightly, but only slightly, right? They won't walk it all the way back to the status quo. They'll still have pushed things a little bit further. And then they come back a couple of years later and they keep trying to push it. And you see the goalposts shift slowly over time. That, like Ty says, that could exactly be what happens here. They might walk back some of this. Maybe they will walk back maybe they'll change like the notice, give it 60 days. Like they might change some of the clauses so that it's slightly less onerous. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is what they want. And even if, and I think another point, adjacent to what Ty says, is that even if this goes to a courtroom and a court determines that Wizards can't change it this way, that they can't revoke the previous Open Gaming License, we all need to remember that they tried to change it, that this is what they want. This is the scenario that they want. They are happy to put smaller third parties out of business because they want more money from them. They want to register their interest in them. You can't forget, like, this is how these companies get away with this sort of stuff. They hope that people forget that they can do this stuff and walk away. Don't forget. This happened before. This is not the first time Wizards have tried to do this. In 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, they tried the exact same thing with the gaming service. I think it's the gaming service license. That was the exact same thing. They tried to get everybody, all the Open Gaming License was... It wasn't replaced, but there was a new version of it created for D&D 4th edition that was just as restrictive as the one that we're looking at today. What happened then? Nobody moved on to the new license. Nobody cared about Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. Pathfinder emerged. And that's what made Pathfinder so successful. Because everyone was like, no thanks, Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. I don't think so. And everybody stuck around with Pathfinder. Why? Because they had the option of continuing to use the Open Gaming License from the year 2000. I don't know why I keep saying the year 2000. What's happening this time? Wizards of the Coast are trying to remove the previous Open Gaming License. They're trying to close it up. They have learned their lesson. And the lesson was grip tighter. That's what they want. They want to grip it tighter, and that is super, super dangerous. I mean, it's obviously the worst lesson. Kim Bahar says, gotta bounce. I wish you all a fun stream. By the way, Vestin is not necessarily horror if you don't want it to be, but it does suit that genre, as well as mystery, much more than any others. Well, thank you very much for the recommendation. I'll definitely check that out. The game system license is D20 Play. Yes, that is exactly it. Sean says the Magic the Gathering community is different. It has two different markets. The collectors who want their cards to have high investment value, and players who just want to play. And they're often at odds. I've heard about that. Honestly, as someone who is an outsider to it, I find the whole investment side of Magic the Gathering kind of a bit wild. Like, as someone who just looks at it as a game, right? Because I kind of perceive it from the outside. The only people who I know play Magic the Gathering were people who were actually very competitive, like very, they would play in the world tournaments and stuff. So I look at it just purely from the game perspective. I don't know about the value or the actual monetary, side of things. Like people invest in Magic cards like they're stocks, and that's just so alien to me. But I can totally see how their considerations would be totally different. Like if it were me, I would just reprint a lot of those older cards. But instead, you have Wizards of the Coast printing out these $1,000 packs for the anniversary edition, right? It's wild. Absolutely wild. Ben Williams says D&D 4th edition was trash. No, I don't think I agree with it. I don't think that the actual game system was trash. But I think it was too gamey for me. It wasn't what I was looking for from a sort of adventuring game. I like games that are a little bit more loose, a little bit loosey-goosey, so that you can kind of do whatever you can imagine, you know? Whereas 4th edition felt very prescriptive in what you could do. It felt very much, people say a video game, but it felt more almost like a board game to me. Just very gamey mechanics. Dylan Typeack says, I'm going to be publishing under the 1.0 OGL anyway, seeing as the content I'm currently writing is only compatible with D20 Modern and Carbon 2185. They can drag my hairy butt to court. Well, good luck, Dylan. Good luck, for sure. Good luck. I hope it all works out fine. I do know I've spoken to a lot of smaller publishers, a lot of smaller designers who have put on hold their plans. This has thrown the entire market completely into whack. And this is why I really think the leaks are true. Wizards have not distanced themselves from it. Wizards have not made a statement yet. And I think that if this wasn't true, Wizards would have 100% have already said, no, this is a false leak. This isn't real. 100%. But they haven't. And the reason why they haven't is because they're watching the damage and looking to think of how they can actually come out with a response to this. And thirdly, probably working out whether or not they need to amend the license at all after all this outcry. But if this wasn't true, they would have said already, because there are third parties, there are companies right now who are losing money. There are companies who are having to completely change all their plans. There is all this madness going on. Paizo are consulting with lawyers. I bet, they haven't mentioned it, but MCDM, I bet, are consulting with lawyers. All these different companies are consulting with lawyers. I bet that Wizards of the Coast are getting telephone calls from lawyers and attorneys and companies, and they haven't issued out a statement yet. Well, I think that says it all. I really do think that says it all. Thank you very much for the donation there. Brent Stewart says, would the US Supreme Court's ruling on not being able to copyright game mechanics protect Paizo from Wizards of the Coast? So this is something I see people talking about a lot, that because you cannot copyright game mechanics, what that means is that like Paizo and basically every RPG should be safe, right? Even if they're using the D20 system, even if they're using skills, even if they're using feats, even if they're using all these kind of game mechanics, you cannot copyright game mechanics, and therefore what that means is that those companies are safe. But I actually don't think that's true, okay? It is true that you can't copyright game mechanics. That is true. But creating games without the open gaming license isn't as easy as you think. Because game mechanics can't be copyrighted, but this entire issue is a huge gray area. It is uncertain. I think it was best summed up. There was a tweet that I saw from Old Gods Games. I'm actually going to open this tweet right now on stream to show you guys. This was this is from Old God Games, I think, are a smaller third-party company. They're making a tabletop role-playing game, and they said this. That is the wrong thing. That is boarding actions, not an advert. Okay, so here we go. This is from Old God Games. They tweeted this. You can create something mechanically compatible with D&D without a license. But to paraphrase our legal counsel, there is no solid line between what's okay and what isn't. It is a very gray area, and any one instance of perceived infringement could result in a costly legal battle. This is why the open gaming license is so important. This is why it is so important, because it gives certainty and comfort to companies. Right now, without the open gaming license, if you're trying to create something, it may be mechanically different. It may not fall, it may be mechanically similar. But it's a lot of risk. It's a ton of risk. One wrong move, you get a single cease and desist from Wizards of the Coast because they think it's too close, it's too similar, that they have some sort of trademark or some sort of some claim to some of the mechanics, to some of your game, and it could ruin you. So many of these companies just can't afford to fight legal battles with Wizards of the Coast, and it would absolutely bankrupt them. So why take the risk? It's less risky just to sign the onerous terms in the open gaming license. So this is like a really, really bad situation for the entire industry, honestly. So even in the case where just because you can't copyright game mechanics, the open gaming license still has a massive amount of value, a huge amount of value, for sure. So Grim Jim says there are no mechanics or terms that are unique to D&D. So long as you phrase it differently, you should be fine. But that word "should" is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Should be fine. As a company, I wouldn't want to risk my livelihood hoping that I won't fall victim to this. And that Wizards of the Coast are sensible enough to know that. You're also relying on Wizards of the Coast not just throwing their weight around. This happens all the time. Companies like Games Workshop, for example, they constantly put out what I would call trolling cease and desist letters to people who are creating miniatures. And Games Workshop will claim that they have, they're Space Marines. They may be completely different from Space Marines. Games Workshop don't have a copyright to Space Marines. They're not even using the trademarked term of like Adeptus Astartes. I think that's probably trademarked. But Games Workshop will still, on a punt, send out a cease and desist letter because 9 times out of 10, what happens is that small person cannot take Games Workshop to court. So what do? They just give up because they know that in order to actually fight this battle will cost them way too much money in legal fees. They can't afford to do it. It's more hassle than it's worth. And that's what these big companies rely on. The Open Gaming License was essentially an insurance policy to say that Wizards of the Coast can't do that. All you need to go is go, Wizards, I'm using your Open Gaming License. I've obeyed that. Off we go. Off we go. And that was a good scenario. Obviously not for Wizards of the Coast. Thank you very much for the donation there. Charles says, I started with chainmail. Wow, okay. Wow, that's pretty old school. Found Call of Cthulhu and especially love the Delta Green variant. I love Delta Green. Delta Green is one of my favorite role-playing games of all time. So I'm massively into the X-Files. I really love horror. I really love kind of all those like classic Roswell alien stuff. Delta Green is absolutely awesome. I love it. Charles says they play Deadlands and Unknown Armies. Any game with a character class known as a Dipsomancer is my kind of game. That's pretty awesome. I tell you what, actually, Charles, I was reading the oh god, what is it? Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland the other day. They sent me through the game, and I was checking out the game, and there is a class in this called the Brudicorn, which is basically a mutated unicorn guy who roams the wasteland. That sounded like a really fun adventurer class. It was a very intense game. It looked like a lot of fun. Grimgen says the same stats are found in many games. They totally are. Like, don't get me wrong. The problem is a lot of this is a gray, nebulous area, and what companies and businesses and people who are trying to stake their livelihoods don't want is gray area. Nobody wants uncertainty. People want to be able to sleep in their bed at night, comfortable that they're not going to get sued in the morning. And they may have the moral, they may have the ethical, they may even have the legal right, but if a company that employs hundreds and hundreds of lawyers can take exception to what you're doing, right or wrong, and send you a letter and completely shut down your business, I mean, who wants that stress? Who wants that stress? So the Open Gaming License, I think, definitely serves a massive purpose for companies, for sure. Beaver says, read Disney stuff. Note that even if Open Gaming License 1.1 is globally revoked 1.0a, it doesn't, says Beaver. It wouldn't affect anything already published, only future things published. That's an interesting point. I'm not sure if that's true or not, honestly. I imagine the Wizard of the Coast will probably argue that it applies to everything. Probably going forward, right? So this is actually a pretty interesting question. If it only applies to things that are going forward, if you continue to sell Pathfinder, for example, well, that might have been created under the previous license, but now it's being sold under the new license, right? In theory, right? In theory, it's being sold under the new license. So does that get captured, right? There's all these little questions that all become super important all of a sudden. This is the sort of stuff I think that's going to need to be settled in a courtroom. I really do. I can see no way out of this outside of Wizard of the Coast walking things back, changing the terms to what people are actually can accept, or it gets taken to court and it has to get shook out. Let's see here. Alan says, too many RPGs to try, too much life stealing my gaming time. Well, I get that. I mean, I live the game. I'm fine with that. I think take all the time in the world. Danny Smith says, check out Heart of the City Beneath You. If you like dungeon crawls, much better system and so much more unique than the bland token fantasy of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder. I think Pathfinder has a little bit of a vibe. Even Dungeons and Dragons these days, it kind of started token-esque, but I would actually say that Dungeons and Dragons has a much more of an American perspective now on fantasy as opposed to the kind of more British token style, for sure. Redfield says, my bank will not let me send a super chat to you for some reason. Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, Red, for sure. But thank you for the thought. I really do appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for watching. Redabor says, pretty much Open Game License is cut off your nose to spite your face. So this is the thing. I think it is actually a really dumb idea from Wizards to do this. Thank you very much for joining there, Alan Foley. I really appreciate that. Thank you for joining the Discoursaires. Thank you. Red Foreman says, it might be a good thing in the fact that it would encourage new systems instead of just bolting on new stuff for Dungeons and Dragons. Thank you very much for the $5 donation there, Red. So this is a really interesting point. I've seen people make this point that because of this massive blow up, people are now willing to, like, because Games Workshop, there's a Freudian slip because of Games Workshop, because Wizards of the Coast are making things a lot harder to actually create games in their system, make it compatible, and they're making it more onerous and the terms less attractive, we're going to have more people move on to other systems. Like I said at the beginning, I think that that's probably true for the big ones. I don't think that's going to be true for the smaller companies. I think there will be a lot of people who try to make games in other systems, but I do think there is a lot of value in being able to make games for Dungeons and Dragons for the smaller companies because it gives access to these other markets. Now, that said, is it better for the role-playing game industry? Is it better for the role-playing game market? Is it better for the role-playing game hobby as a whole for more companies to build games for other TTRPGs, to not build everything for Dungeons and Dragons, to make things more diverse in terms of the game systems that we run for? Yes, I think it is. Long term, it's better for that to be the case. But this is sort of a scenario like the way you saw after the Black Death, after the plague ravaged Europe, and suddenly the expansion of the middle class and wages went up for all those like farm laborers, and it created like a mercantile society with better wages. Yes, it was better in the long term, but I mean, a lot of people died on the way, and I think that this is going to be devastating for so many companies, and that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about all these smaller companies that are going to get devastated by these terms. And it's a risk. We're not even sure whether or not other companies are going to support other TTRPGs, or whether or not this is going to cause a massive furor in the community, and then things will ossify again, and slowly things will go back to the status quo, only this time it's worse for everybody, except for Wizards of the Coast. That's another thing I'm worried about. Mike Tyke, thank you very much for the donation. $5 says, seeing this happen with too many creative endeavors. Starts out wonderfully, then capitalists figure out how to monetize, milk, and suck the life out of it. I think a ton of this comes 100% from Hasbro Wizards. I think they are trying to create more profit, right? This is like one of those issues where they've got the low-hanging fruit. Right? They have created books. They've sold the books. They've made money off them. They are selling plushies. They've made money off them. They have licensed the game for video games. They're making money off it. You get these executives who are then like, well, how do we keep making money? Because they gotta keep making more money for shareholders. And they're like, okay, how do we keep making money? And they start going for the forbidden fruit. They start going for the higher things. They start maybe going, okay, maybe we can squeeze over here or squeeze over there. And now we're getting into the realm where the only way for them to make more money, they basically are selling as many books as they can. Now they're going to have to just start doing other stuff. Maybe now they start squeezing some of the third-party industry. Maybe now they start trying to build a virtual tabletop system that they can monetize like video games, right? These are new ways, innovative ways to monetize their audience. And I think that's kind of inevitable whenever you have a company set up where it is so incentivized to have to constantly grow. This feels like it's the kind of end state of these big, massive public companies. I blame it a lot on companies that go public because they suddenly have incentives beyond just make a good game. I think make a good game is a really good incentive, and you see it with lots and lots of hobby companies that are just like, I want to make a good game. But these big, massive behemoths, these big public companies, they can't just make a good game. Now they've got to be like, I gotta maximize, I gotta optimize the profit out of these games. You're selling Dungeons and Dragons, buddy. Just make a good game and people will buy it. But that's not enough. That can't ever be enough. So yeah, I totally agree. I think we've seen it with the entire hobby of video games, and I think now we're starting to see it with tabletop role-playing games, and I think we're starting to see it with war games as well. It's rough. Because those two hobbies, they're very similar in that they are both cemented around these single brands. Those brands have a lot of power of what they want to do. Wizards of the Coast right now are acting like a monopoly. And that's because, in effect, they kind of are. They're not the only game in town. Obviously, there's loads of games. And, you go to Japan and everybody's playing Call of Cthulhu, right? No one's playing Dungeons and Dragons over there. But, at the same time, if you ask anybody outside of role-playing about tabletop role-playing, I used to tell people, I play tabletop role-playing games. They'd look at me like I was a weird. They'd be like, what are you talking about? I'd say, like Dungeons and Dragons. bam, they know what I'm talking about, right? Because I guess I'm hanging out at all those cocktail clubs with Chris Cox. I can assure you, Chris Cox, that leisure centres in Belfast also are aware of Dungeons and Dragons. Street parties are also aware of Dungeons and Dragons, not just the cocktail clubs in LA. But people would know what I'm talking about when I say Dungeons and Dragons. And to me, that is a massive amount of brand recognition, and it means that anybody getting into role-playing games goes through Dungeons and Dragons. So what happens whenever Dungeons and Dragons tries to create a closed garden? They try to create a wall around the rest of the hobby. Well, that's a big problem. And you see what happens with like Games Workshop, for example. They make it really hard to play any other game other than a Games Workshop game. Alan says, we're playing D&D 5th edition because it is the in thing. There are other games I have tried that are actually better. Wizards of the Coast is how to make sure they stop being the in thing. So I actually think that this was dumb. If we're like looking at it from Wizards of the Coast perspective, if we're looking at, right, so if we are an executive, we imagine we are an executive at Wizards of the Coast at Hasbro, and we're like, we want to maximize money from Dungeons and Dragons. The dumb thing here is to try and do this, is to go after the big companies like Paizo, to go after Critical Role, to try and basically try to get money out of them. I think that's really dumb, because those companies have value, soft value to Wizards of the Coast. They have soft value to the brand Dungeons and Dragons. It is partly them that keep people playing Dungeons and Dragons. They are the reason why Dungeons and Dragons is the cultural juggernaut that it is today. A part of the reasons anyway, but they help maintain the Dungeons and Dragons ascendancy. So by going after someone like Critical Role, imagine what they have done is they have guaranteed that a company like Critical Role are no longer going to be one of the biggest advertisements for Dungeons and Dragons. Instead, they are going to become one of the biggest competitors to Dungeons and Dragons. I think this was a boneheaded move. I think this was a bad move from their perspective as well. This is short-term greed. That it reads to me totally like short-term greed, because they don't care. They're not going to be around in 5 years. They're not going to be around in 10 years. They've got their backgrounds. Most executives aren't coming from the hobby. They're coming from banking. They're coming from finance. They're coming from accountancy. They're coming from video games like Microsoft. Chris Cox is originally from Microsoft, right? So they're not going to be here forever. They don't care about the long-term value of the game. They don't care about the hobby. They care about the profit today, tomorrow, when they are being held accountable for the profits. If they can make money tomorrow because of this, then it's worth it. If that means that ultimately 10 years down the line, Dungeons and Dragons is no longer like the main game in the hobby, well, then they don't care. They're not going to be around for that. And if that does massive damage to the actual role-playing game hobby, well, they don't care about that either. Crypto Kev donated $10. Thank you very much, says, ahoy nerds. Just dropping in to say hi to all. Man, I should play Call of Cthulhu again. Call of Cthulhu is an absolutely excellent game. I totally love it. I kind of dig the D100 systems, you know? I really like it. I think it's a really, really fun game. I would totally recommend it. Red Foreman says, with a donation of $5, thank you very much, says, nothing to say that this leak wasn't sending out a feeler and seeing what the reaction could be if unpopular enough, and then they could always change their plans. I've heard this suggested, Red. I'm not certain, basically. I mean, I don't know whether or not we know or not. I guess ultimately, I'm not sure if it matters either, I suppose, right? Because I think that this is something they definitely, this is what they want to do, I think. I think this gives us like a glimpse at their rationale. So whether or not their goal is to like do this, see if they can get away with it or not, I guess it doesn't really change the response of, this is really bad, they need to be held accountable. But I take your point. Like I mentioned before, I think I've heard of video game companies doing this. I've heard of Wizards of the Coast doing this in Magic the Gathering. So definitely, I think it is totally plausible. I think it's totally possible that they did this. It's an element of PR, right? It's an element of PR. I just think that the fact that they have not issued a response to this yet is very suspicious. If this wasn't true, I really do feel like they would have already let us know, because there's a lot of money being spent right now that I think they would have wanted to avoid. Jason says, day one, all big no publishers that have open game license on their content are finding a way to dump their open game license system reference document out of their books. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, people are this is causing chaos. This is causing absolute chaos in the industry. People don't know what this means. And the problem is, it's created all this legal uncertainty. It really has. People are consulting lawyers. Lawyers are disagreeing with one another. Court cases are gonna have to happen. They're just gonna have to happen, and nobody really wants that, apart from lawyers. The lawyers really like these sorts of scenarios because it means lots of money for lawyers. That means they can go to court and like bada bing, bada boom, you know? I hope this means we're gonna see more people producing games under the Chaosium open game license, though. Because I think they have actually made a commitment that they're not going to be changing their license like this. I think they actually committed that, but don't hold me to that. I'm not 100% sure. John, thank you very much for the £5 donation. Says, I would love to see Hasbro clamping down on the diplomacy game mechanics and watching the psychopathic diplomacy community turning on them. Yeah, it's weird. You would never see this in any other kind of hobby, would you? I mean, you see it in wargaming, you see it in role-playing, but I think that's because Wizards of the Coast control role-playing so much, and because Games Workshop control wargaming, you don't really see us in the board gaming community, do you? You don't see, like, you don't really ever see Hasbro going after people in board games, do you? Thank you so much for another $10 donation there, Crypto. Says, Discourse, you're late on your homework. Watch Dairy Girls. And I'll shut the fuck up for it, LMAO. I'm sorry, Kev. I have not watched Dairy Girls yet. I am late. I've been so busy. I've created 2 channels. I'm trying to do videos for both of them. It's been pretty wild. I actually haven't had an opportunity to watch anything. I got an episode of The X-Files in the other day. That was pretty sick. I did like that. I got a big X-Files I Want to Believe poster with the UFO, the one that sits in Mulder's office for Christmas there the other day, and that felt pretty sick. I had to watch some X-Files after that. Han says, with a donation of $5, thank you very much, says, none of this would be happening if we still bullied nerds. Well, I don't know if that's the case. I think that's a little bit unfair. None of this would be still happening. Look, so, I think I do think that there is an element of this that definitely is related to the fact that obviously Dungeons and Dragons has become much more mainstream, right? That's definitely the case. The game has become more popular. Now, on the one hand, that's made it really easy for me to get games in. There's like a massive community of role players in Northern Ireland now. I'm actually the admin of a Dungeons and Dragons group that covers Northern Ireland, and that has seen massive growth over the last couple of years. That there's just so much more people playing games, and that's really good because I have personally witnessed so many people go from just playing Dungeons and Dragons into playing all sorts of different role-playing games. I think that's awesome. I think more people is great. I do think, however, that there is something to be said for the fact that Wizards of the Coast, obviously, they are trying to. So here's the thing, right? And I'm not trying to be disparaging whenever I say any of this, okay? But hold on to your hats for a second. So here's the thing, okay? Wizards of the Coast, I suspect, are hoping that the player base of Dungeons & Dragons is generally speaking, casual enough as to either not know what the open gaming license is or to care, really, what the open gaming license is, and then they can make these sorts of changes, and the general community, sure, there might be elements of the community who are annoyed, but most people are just like, whatever, I just play Dungeons & Dragons, right? I think that's kind of what they're hoping for. They want that more casual player base of people to be like that. Now, I actually think that that's a mistake, because I don't think that there is really too much of a casual player base for these sorts of involved hobbies. I think it's true of wargaming, and I think it is true of role-playing games as well. I think there are degrees, right? I mean, I'm talking like from the level of somebody who watches, I don't know, like Marvel movies, that's all they do, down all the way to, like, you know, the hardcore DM, right? And they're super hardcore. This kind of span of, like, not really super invested in stuff to really, really, really invested. I think almost everybody who actually picks up a book and actually role plays in Dungeons & Dragons or any other role-playing game is relatively invested in the hobby and is relatively clued in as well. That's one of the things about this hobby. It's super collaborative, and wargaming is the exact same way. It requires effort. It's not like you can just sit and watch it and consume it passively. You have to engage with it. Now, I know there are lots and lots of DMs out there who are like, my players won't engage. They just want to sit there and roll dice. But here's the thing, right? They know about Dungeons & Dragons. They had to read their character sheet to an extent. They had to write something down. And that is like 1,000,000 times more engagement than just turning on the TV and watching whatever comes on. Anybody who's sat in front of Netflix and scrolled by show after show after show unsure of what to watch knows how easy it is just to let TV tell you what to watch. But with games like this, you have to engage with it. So I don't think that there is a super casual player base. I think the super casual player base are the ones who watched Stranger Things, thought it was really cool, and buy a t-shirt that has D&D on it. And I'm not condemning people, like, that's fine. People are into what they're into. But I don't think that those people are like the market of Dungeons and Dragons players. I think most Dungeons and Dragons players watch YouTube, or they at the very least like check out like subreddits every so often, or hear about it at the table. There are conversations that happen in the table. This is like trying to change things on the coffee houses of Europe in like the 1800s, as they all debate philosophy, and you try to change what philosophy is on them from right under their feet, right? I'm sure there is some people at the coffee houses that were like, I'm just here for just a bit of coffee and just to chat because my mates all go. But I'm sure that they would have been exposed to the conversations, you know. So I think that is 100% the case. Thank you very much for the donation there. Crypto Kev said, I had Gillian Anderson, Dana Scully in my wall for years. Always had a fatal weakness for redheads. We used to play Conspiracy X back in the 90s as a clear RPG-based game on the X-Files. Good game. That's awesome. I love Scully. I love Scully. You ever hear about the Scully effect? She caused, her appearance on the X-Files caused so many young women to go into like science. Because Scully made it possible. She made it like, it became cool. Like, well, not cool. Was the X-Files ever cool? I think it was. It's always been cool. But she made it kind of acceptable. People were like, oh, maybe I want to become a pathologist who has to team up with a wooden-acted Fox Mulder and explain to him that people cannot shoot lightning out of their hands. But then they can anyway, because Mulder's always right. Because Mulder is the best player character ever. He always follows the quest. He doesn't question it. He just always goes for it. And he just accepts what the DM tells him, no matter what. Seriously, you can watch X-Files episodes and it is 100% a role-playing game. Okay, Leo, thank you very much for the donation there of $5. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Mac Attack, thank you very much for the donation, says, Lawrence Schmidt-Husrick, okay, I'm sorry, I'm not able to pronounce that very well, of The Witcher, is probably very happy that Wizard of the Coast Hasbro just stepped on his rig after firing Cavill and debut of the Witcher. Yes, Blood Origins, of course. You know what, actually, I started watching The Witcher, and I sort of just fell off the wagon with it. I don't know. I didn't really like super duper get into it. I love the video games, and I liked some of the short stories, but I don't know, the TV show, I just kind of fell off it a little bit. But yeah, firing Cavill, all of that, sounds like a bit of a mess. But it has 100% changed the conversations. Now, all anybody wants to talk about is the open gaming license. I think there's been a lot of companies have gotten a lot of cover from this. Let's see here. Pharaoh's Tower says, Critical Role theaters got common folk into D&D. Steph says, pirating is the only way to get PDS for Dungeons & Dragons. Yes! I am someone who was I liked the Trove. There, I said it. I know that's kind of like cultural suicide these days. But I thought the Trove served a really important purpose. It allowed people to try out PDFs and try out games. There are so many games that I first played by accessing the Trove and checking out the PDFs and then buying the game because I was like, hey, I'm actually having fun with this. You'll actually find that smaller indie companies tend to be the ones that are most in favor of things like the Trove. For those who don't know, the Trove was this resource where basically almost every single RPG you could imagine was uploaded onto there in PDF form, and people could, it was a pirating website. It was basically a pirating website. But if I go on to, like, say, the Drive-Thru RPG today, so many smaller supplement companies just let you preview their entire PDF. They let you preview the entire one because they expect that people are reasonable and will pay money if they get value out of it. And I think that's totally true. I actually think that most people are honest and they will pay money if they really like a thing. I really do honestly think that's the case. Thank you. Yeah. So there we go. That was a bit of a... But pirating is a way to get PDFs for D&D, for sure, like 100%. David Bell says, well, sounds like someone needs to fight. Dark Winter says, good point, will it be enough to hide the reaction to Season 3? No, I think whenever Season 3 comes out, people will get in. I think the moment that people see Cavill not as the Witcher, they'll be a bit like, the performance, I don't know who they have gotten to replace Cavill, but his performance is going to have to be really, really good. John Gus says, have you seen the deluge of videos of people so outraged over OGL 1.1 that they're leaving B&D and Hasbro behind? I think the exodus has already begun. I think that's interesting for sure. Like, this was a very bad PR move from Hasbro. That was a very, very bad PR move from Hasbro, for sure. Like, for sure. I think there's a lot of people who are, like, moving on. I think Pathfinder is probably the easiest game to just go one-to-one on. But I do hope that people use this up as an opportunity to try other games. I really do. I hope that other people use this as like an impetus. This is the sort of stuff that it requires it, right? I think we, for the longest time, had a lot of inertia in the hobby. There was a status quo. It's like, I just play Dungeons and Dragons stuff, there we go. But this is so bad that it's actually getting casual players to try other games. And that's pretty good. Like, that's like the one little sliver, the silver lining element of all of this, is that actually, I do think that we're going to see people move over to other games. It's this kind of chaos in the community. What is it? Chaos is a ladder. It's this kind of chaos in the community that will allow, I think, some other games to maybe rise up a little bit. And selfishly, I hope it's Delta Green. No, but I think that this could. I mean, like, remember, it was the changeover in 4th edition that got everybody into Pathfinder originally back in 3.5 edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Are we going to see a similar thing? I think time will tell, but I definitely feel like history is in the making here. I think that this is a historic moment in role-playing games. 100%. No matter what happens next, this is a historic moment. I think we're seeing massive sea changes here. You do not need a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing, for sure. Let's see here. A lot of people talking about how hot Scully was. I do not disagree. I do not disagree at all. Red Obora says, I'm addicted to drive-thru RPG. Me too. It's fucking awesome. Jason says Trove is there. You can get it with a tour. I've never used the tour actually. Nope. Nas says I've decided to never ever buy or play Zweihander because of what happened to the Trove. It was Daniel D. Fox, I think, was the one who got it shut down, but I'm not 100% certain on that. Jazz Hunt says I've never watched Critical Role. The idea of people playing an RPG and not playing myself is baffling to me. So I actually don't watch a lot of actual plays as well. I do play in an actual play every Tuesday with the component cast. We're playing Zweihander actually. We do play through that. But I haven't, I haven't ever, I don't really watch Critical Role. I've listened to a few actual plays. I've played through, I've listened to some Delta Green games, actually. I think I've listened to a couple of Call of Cthulhu games. But I tend not to listen to the long form ones. I like to listen to one-shots, because they're kind of like audio plays, you know what I mean? Like, that kind of element is fun. But I've never really sat down and watched, like, a Critical Role session. Ontario Rockhound says, yep, I think our community is very supportive of indie companies. I think so, too. I think that they are. Especially, like, the hardcore gamers, right? And as Wizards said themselves, it's Dungeon Masters who spend most of the money on the game. And I think it's Dungeon Masters are also tend to be the ones who want to support other companies as well. I think the hobby, the role-playing game hobby, and this is something that Wizards have actually fallen afoul of, I think it's a very value-driven hobby. I think that people want to support companies that they like. I think that people want to support smaller companies. I think that they want to make sure that there is a healthy, responsible kind of marketplace. You know, this is a consumer hobby that tends to have people think about the stuff that they do a lot of the time. I think a lot of DMs do, for sure. And there's a lot of people who just play D&D because it's the status quo. But I think a lot of people won't want to play D&D if they think the Wizards of the Coast are behaving unethically, if they're behaving badly. And Wizards of the Coast are kind of falling foul of that right now, for sure, I think. Let's see here. Joseph says, Wizards of the Coast has become every big bad evil that every player has dreamed of slaying. I do think it is kind of funny that they have definitely become that. It's the same with Games Workshop. These big companies, they end up just kind of turning on their player base. They become the very things they swore to destroy. For sure. They make the Sauron, the Mordor kind of analogies a little bit too easy, in my opinion. Definitely. Let's see here. Atomic House Film says, how sure are we that all of this OGL news is true? So I personally think that it is almost certain. Even if, okay, this is where I get a little bit, I kind of have a little bit of an unfair perspective on this, because even if it changes, I suspect that they will have changed it in the background. I think it's almost true. I think it's almost 100% true, because firstly, Wizards have not made any statements to say that it's not true, and there's a lot of money happening. I'm sure they're being contacted by a lot of people. Now, that could also be explained by the fact that they're just trying to, they're trying, maybe the OGL wasn't ready, maybe, and they're just trying to kind of, you know, get a PR piece out, but I mean, they really should have done it already. Secondly, we've seen lots of industry veterans had already previously, before these leaks happened, they had already hinted that this was the way that the document appeared to be going from their conversations with employees at Wizards of the Coast. Thirdly, journalists have now seen the full documentation, and they're I think they are responsible sources. They're journalists, right? So Gizmodo have seen it. And also, I think fourthly, Kickstarter has already negotiated some of the terms of this open game license with Wizards of the Coast. So if we look at like point number one, which is they haven't made a statement yet. They haven't made a statement publicly, but Wizards of the Coast have negotiated parts of this already with Kickstarter. Kickstarter have negotiated a 25% royalty fee down to 20%. So, I mean, that's saying something. I think the Wizards are either currently reworking it because the outcry's so big, or they're trying to figure out how to frame it so that it's not as bad as... so it doesn't sound as bad as it is. Crypto Kev, thank you again for another donation. Wow, thank you very much. Says back later, all because the lady loves milk chocolate. Milk chocolate is awesome. Milk chocolate is awesome. I love milkshakes. But though I gotta say, my favorite milkshake is a brand called Yazoo, and it's banana flavored, and I absolutely love it. I don't really like banana things otherwise, but I really love that one. Joji, thank you very much for the €5 donation. Says the Genesis is the GOAT, and far more people should be playing it. Disregard Wizards and Hasbro entirely. Degenesis. Well, thank you for this. I actually haven't heard of Degenesis. I'm gonna write that one down. Let me write that one down because I wanna check out more games for sure. I wanna check out more games. I've played a lot of games, but I always get sort of attracted towards the horror end of things for sure. Baronessa says Wizards of the Coast is now joining ranks with our good old pal Games Workshop. There is a meme floating around out there where thank you very much for the follow there, Mycenas, on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/discoursgames. Anyone interested? I play a lot of Blood Bowl online. Yeah, there is a meme floating around right now, which is just Marge and Bart Simpson, and Marge saying, no Games Workshop, no! And then it's Wizard of the Coast, and she's like, sorry, just forced to have it. And it feels so true. It speaks to me on a very, very deep level. Tommy F says, I think I am naming a villain after Hasbro. The evil company that we worked for in the game of Mothership that we played yesterday on the Gaming Materialists was called GWH, which was Games Workshop Hasbro, a massive conglomerate in the year 3000, I think it was. Yeah, it was pretty spooky. Christopher Plummer says, that is exactly how I used the Trove. It led me to buy a large number of newer books or seek out older games for sale on eBay. 100% the same. The company, like, games that were uploaded to the Trove got so much more money out of me than, like, games that were not, because I found out about them and I could spend them. And I'm the type of person who, if I like a game, I will buy it. Like, I will buy. I like to have the physical copies of things as well. I think we're playing at a table. I like the tactile experience of games. It's why I love war games. It's why I really love games like Arkham Horror. It's why I love RPGs. You've got the physical things in your hand. I think so much of it is the tactile community collaborative spirit of things that, just personally for me, I don't really like to play on VTTs as much, although it can be really convenient sometimes. Jednome says, I wonder about 13th Age. They use the OGL, I think. 13th Age. No, I'm thinking of 7 Seas. 13th Age I have not played. Hopefully they're okay, though. Hopefully they're okay. The problem is that nobody knows right now. Nobody knows. Now, I have to call attention to this. There is a person called Goblin Twink, and they are saying to check out the cipher system. It's lit, and they've done a little fire emoji. Firstly, love Goblin Twinks. Secondly, I will check out the cipher system if it is so lit. Thank you very much. Suntai, thank you for the follow there. And Ty Lasana, thank you very much for the donation of $5. Thank you. Says, so Green Ronin made Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing 2nd Edition. Green Ronin is going to be hit by the OGL. GW could be the anti-villain we need. Oh no. Oh god, Games Workshop comes in with the steel chair at the very last minute. Oh my goodness. The Undertaker. That is wild. No, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay wasn't made using the OGL, was it? This is the thing, though. I think that I think that Wizards of the Coast wouldn't go after a company like Games Workshop, you know. I don't think they would. I think they'd be afraid of a company like Games Workshop. Games Workshop's like, he may be a lot smaller than Wizards of the Coast, but you know he's got a knife and he knows how to use it. Like that's the crazy guy in the corner. You do not mess with him. He's stabbing anybody he sees. That's the way the Games Workshop operate. They kind of punch above their weight, you know? They go after everybody like a rabid dog. They just don't care. Quiff says, problem with my group is new rule systems are a pain to learn. Just a group of people in their late 30s stuck in their ways. I understand. I totally get you. There is definitely an inertia. Here is my suggestion, Quiff. Here is my suggestion. Okay? This is what our group does. So we often play long campaigns of a certain game. You should just put the onus on the dungeon master, the person who really wants to play a game, to just learn the system and kind of walk people through it and just do like a one-shot of the system where you don't really need to learn too much about it. Just try some casual one-shots here and there and give people a little bit of a taste of these other games. And you might find that actually it's not about learning the system, it's about playing in a different kind of context, something that isn't just a fantasy game, for example. Otherwise, I'd say just play Pathfinder, if that's the case. Because Pathfinder is so similar to Dungeons & Dragons. It's so similar. Zach Miller says, always trust a Twinkie goblin. Hell yeah. Can I just ask, when did Twink stop meaning a level 19 World of Warcraft character who had like all the blues, who had the Defias gear, like a rogue, you know, in Warsong Gulch, and started meaning some sexy little goblin? When did this transition happen? I wasn't party to this. I wasn't made clear on this. Danny Smith says, players are Wizards of the Coast's customers. Wall Street, our stock price will go up, and that's all that matters to them. Yes, and the thing is, Wizards really want to squeeze a lot of money out of players these days, right? They're sick of only relying on the on the DMs. The Dungeons and Dragons is under-monetized. Walter says Cyber Systems is released under Monty Cook's open license, but he based it on Wizards of the Coast open gaming license 1.A, still a completely different license. This all starts to get really technical and weird. It gets really technical and weird. Jacob Canis says the systems for fantasy-themed games I can recommend are Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Cyber System, One Ring, and Savage Worlds as a replacement for the usual D20 systems. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplaying game is a lot of fun. It's a D100 system. I do like that. I haven't played the One Ring, but I have a friend who's like, he's like super into Lord of the Rings. Like, he's a Lord of the Rings nerd, and he really likes One Ring. He really, really likes it. So, there you go. I've never played it personally, so I cannot like personally recommend it myself. Alan says, Cypher is great with people getting items that do weird stuff that they need to use or lose. Makes the game feels like puzzles and MacGyver. Jason Wilson says, DMGM awarded on the cover of new books. Rena says, Discourse Minis, Twink as a term dates back further than WoW. I remember it being a specific build for Ultima Online. There you go. You learn something new every day. Grim Gem says, they're guaranteeing they'll make less money, not more. I think so too, honestly. I think that the end result of this is actually going to hurt Wizards of the Coast more than it's going to help them. Because there's very few companies that actually will hit the 750,000. This is, I do see this brought up a lot. This is kind of reminiscent of Blizzard Entertainment. And I think it's a totally apt comparison. Wizards of the Coast, like Blizzard, so for those who don't know, Blizzard Entertainment, they made Warcraft, they made StarCraft. They're a really big creator of video games. They had their height in like the 2000s, okay? And they created Warcraft 3, and Warcraft 3 had this modding scene. It's kind of similar to the Open Gaming license. Open Gaming license is basically like you can mod Dungeons and Dragons and sell it for money. Warcraft 3, you couldn't make mods and sell them, but you could just make mods. And there was a really popular mod called Dota, Defense of the Ancients, and people really loved it. The people who created the mod MOBA then went on to make, it gets really tricky, but long story short, essentially, Dota became a really popular game. They went on and made an actual video game and sold it for money and made lots of cash and loads of money. It was free. There was another version called League of Legends. Don't worry about it. There we are. So, there we go. They made loads of money. Blizzard saw this. Blizzard were like, the game was originally made in our engine. We didn't get a cent of this. We were very mad. We were very angry. And so whenever they redid Warcraft 3, 2020, I think it was, they changed the licensing agreements so that they were basically like, anyone who makes a game in our modding, using our mods, using our world editor, any money you make belongs to us. Essentially, I can't remember what the exact terms were. What has happened? It killed the modding community. No one wants to mod in that anymore. And I'm worried that the same thing's going to happen with the Open Gaming license. People are going to be like, I don't want to risk Wizards of the Coast being able to take my game and sell it for lots of cash, you know? And maybe Wizards might be generous. They might be magnanimous, and they might say, "Hello there, small third party. We will give you $20 for your game," in an act of beneficence. And they will just have to accept that, because any money's better than no money at all. But I don't think people are going to be happy with that. That they can be put in such a position where $20 is looking like a good deal for something that's worth so much more. Weird Guy 564, thank you very much for the donation. Says, any love for playing Palladium Fantasy around here? It was my game of choice as a youth, and I still haven't played D&D because of it. I haven't played it. I actually haven't played it. This is the thing with the role-playing games. Once you it's like whenever you lift up a rock and you see all the wood lice underneath, there are so many. I'm not comparing games to insects as if they're like this horrible mess of bugs. There's just so many of them, is my point. There is so many games out there. This is the beauty, I think, of role-playing games. It's the same thing with word games. So much of the content is created, just pure imagination and then words on a page, right? It's not like a video game. You don't have to build these massive engines and all this labor. You can build, you can be a passionate creator. You can be a hobbyist, and you can build a game and you can sell it. And that means the barrier to entry is pretty low compared to some other stuff, which means we get this huge amount of variety of games. And I love that. I think that's absolutely awesome. And I'm not trying to undermine design work, not far from it. Designing is really hard, but my point is that you can write, you can put pen to paper, and you can build a game, and then you can sell it, and that's beautiful. That is really cool. You can make a living potentially of being able to follow your dreams, and that's so cool. There's so little places in the world where you can get to do that, and I think that's absolutely awesome. Let's see here. Palladium Fantasy is fun, says Diogenes Caster. Let's see. Ty Lastana says, can I offer you an egg in this trying time for your RPG content? Well, thank you very much. I would really appreciate that. Jeez. Let's see here. Barrow says, not only will they sell the game that they made, but they are under no obligation at all to pay anything or even acknowledge them, like GW with the art. Exactly. And that's really bad. But if I know one thing, it's that small companies, creators who feel like they're between a rock and a hard place will sign extremely onerous contracts because they don't have any power in the situation with Wizards of the Coast. I agree that the sensible thing to do is to not develop under the open gaming license under the terms that are set right now. But so many people will feel the pressure to sign, or else they just won't have a chance at all. And so they would rather sign with bad situation, with bad terms, than not sign at all. People will feel that pressure. I know that because I have agreed to do jobs that were bad. I have done really bad jobs with really bad pay. I have worked in all sorts of scenarios. I myself have accepted bad terms in the past because I felt like it was the only option open to me. And so many people are going to feel that way as well whenever they're trying to sell a game. They're going to think it's either this or no one will care. No one will actually play the game. And that really sucks to be put in that situation. And it is firmly Wizards of the Coast deciding to put people in that situation. And it really, really sucks. Sean Vera, thank you very much for the $5 Canadian donation. Says the OGL 1.0A give Wizards the ability to use anything published under it that is not new. Lots of cases of third parties used other third-party items. Third-party items. That is true, Sean, but I don't think that it granted Wizards the ability to license it, right? And to make a profit on it, surely. I get that it allowed them to do that. But they wouldn't originally have been able to see the books on things, right? Is that not the case? Is that not the case? I'm not sure off the top of my head, personally. Boy Battle says, what Wizards of the Coast failed to understand was that the average gamer will argue about the specific language used to describe a creature that lives under rocks. They should have known we would read their OGL 1.1. This is true. I think I've seen 20 different RPG channels that are called some form of the rules lawyer. And it's like, damn, you picked the wrong community to start changing legal language on your contracts. You picked the wrong community for that. Oh wow, yeah, no, 100%. I mean, there is a culture in this community of trying to be technical with the language on complicated rule sets, right? To me, as someone who has been a lawyer, I think that there's some RPGs out there that are more complicated than most legal documents for sure. Open D&D hashtag Open D&D says Hell Sente. I totally agree. I really like that as a hashtag. I think it's a pretty powerful statement. Open D&D, and I think it goes both towards the OGL and also towards the 1D&D as well, which seems to be increasingly being made to try and emphasize a more virtual tabletop experience. Jet Gnome says we should all be playing 2D20 Conan by Chrome. I've never actually played Conan either, but I really want to because I really like the way that system works, where you get to chop people's heads off and stuff. It sounds really cool, and then that causes a sanity check around everybody around as you throw the head at them. That sounds really cool. Steel Mongoose says I actually had an ancient third-party D&D supplement illustrated by Kevin, starting out Dante's Inferno. See, where else are you going to get the kind of fun stuff like that? Where are you going to get that fun stuff, huh? Cal Vanoni says, I want Wizards of the Coast to double down and feel the wrath of the entire fan base. Honestly, here's the thing. I don't really know how else they could double down on this thing. This feels like pretty as bad as it could get. Honestly, I didn't think it would be this bad. So I am on record as being pretty skeptical of 1D&D, right? I'm pretty skeptical of it because, well, I was around when horse armor was sold and people thought that would never take off, and well, here we are. But I was pretty skeptical of 1D&D, but even I didn't think that it would get this bad. I didn't think it would get this bad. This is wild. Like, this is an insane change. I'll say, I didn't think they were actually going to touch. I thought the changes they were going to make to the open gaming license was to make sure to be explicit that virtual tabletops was not covered by it, which would mean that companies like Foundry, VTT, for example, would have to go and negotiate a bespoke agreement with Wizards of the Coast. I think Wizards of the Coast would have really bad terms for virtual tabletop systems because they wanted to sell their own, because they were like, the 1D&D virtual tabletop has to be on the best. We don't want competitors. So I thought that was going to be the kind of track that they went. Hitting all third parties was not what I expected at all. If anything, I thought they were going to be sensible and just kind of keep things going. I mean, even the 750,000, the royalties kind of made a little bit more sense to me. But some of the other changes are just too much. I just don't get it. Vincent says, this open game license drama has made me find so many new channels, for sure. I've definitely seen, there's been a lot more content kind of covering it, which makes sense. It's really important, I think. I think it does speak to the fact that this is so universally disliked. Has anyone seen a single person try to defend this change? Because I haven't. I haven't seen a single person try and say, like, oh, well, actually, because it's bullying, really. It feels like they're just going after the little guy. It really does feel that way. They're just bullying people. And I think that if Wizards had have just come out and said, it's only $750,000 threshold, and it's only those big companies, and all they have to do is pay us, like, a percentage of royalties, I think most people would have been like, actually, that's not too bad. But it's everything else around that has meant that, like, nobody can really accept it. I don't know if Wizards have just underestimated the strength of feeling on this matter, but it kind of feels like they have. Thank you for the donation, Mac Attack, for the $5 donation. Says, thanks for the stream. I had a great time. Have to go. Hope you have an awesome day. Well, thank you very much, Mac. I hope you have an awesome day as well. Thank you very much for the donations, and thank you very much for hanging out and chatting away with us. Thank you very much for that, and I hope you have a great day. Let's see here. Walter Starr. Sorry, there's like a conversation occurring, so I'm not gonna interject. Hector Hung says, Shadow of the Demon Lord is a superior action fantasy system anyway. I am a fan of Shadow of the Demon Lord. I like how deadly the system is. I like the funnel, where you start off at level 0 and you've got nothing, and then if you survive, you get to level up into a class. I think that's a ton of fun. I love the kind of horror elements. I love how brutal the game system is. I'm a big fan of it. Thank you very much for the donation there. $2 Canadian from Unibutton. Says, Wizards of the Coast having their Blizzard Shadowlands moment. Yeah, Shadowlands was a crazy moment for Blizzards. This is very similar. This has definitely caused a lot of outcry. And I think this will go down. I think this will go down in history. I think people will remember this. Wade A. Parker says, I've played Dungeons & Dragons since 1980 and only switched after trying out 4th edition. We moved to Pathfinder. I do wish I had a group that was willing to try multiple RPGs, but alas, it is not to be. Yeah, this is the thing. I think I'm really privileged. But the group I play in, So people talk about the forever DM issue. I have the opposite problem. We have every single person in our group wants to DM games. So this causes a big issue because I haven't gotten to DM a game in like years. It sucks. I really love DMing games, but I haven't gotten to DM forever because it's like this rotation of like somebody new has to DM every single time because everybody wants to DM a different game. So I'm really privileged in the sense that I've gotten to play like a huge variety of different games, and I've gotten to run loads of games, and I've gotten to play in lots of games, and I think I have the perfect group, really. And I'm not saying that like to kind of like go, haha, I've got it better than you. It's just that I can imagine that it really sucks to like have to be playing one game over and over and over again, for sure. And the same gameplay loop as well, I'm sure it gets kind of a little bit like dull, you know, for like definitely. Mark Clifton says, the tabletop role player class grants bonuses to the pedantic skill. I think you're definitely right with that one, Mark. I think you're definitely right with that one. Drifter says, you're welcome to interject. Not that our opinions are going to stop the liches from feasting on our wallets and souls. I definitely feel that one. Snuggy the Goblin says, it's 750,000 for 9. And I think that's a really important point. At any stage, Wizards could change that threshold. They could change that threshold. They could send an email out. As far as we're aware so far from what it seems, they could send an email out and they could reduce that level threshold. It could go from 750 to 500,000. It could go to 50,000. It could be the Wizards are seeing that they're not making any money from the 750 threshold and reduce that threshold. They could just reduce that threshold. There's nothing to stop them from doing so. Because the actual terms of the 1.1 says that they can change the terms of it. Neil says, hey, Discourse, first time I've been able to get to a live stream. Been listening the whole time, but been driving. So I'm glad you haven't been commenting, Neil. I got a podcast for you to listen to called Old Gods of Appalachia. And if you like it, they'll be... Ooh, well, I've never heard Old Gods of Appalachia. I've never heard of them. Oh God, you weren't driving as you were typing that, Neil, were you? I hope that's just not the end of the comment because of something really bad. Rick says, I have to run now. Thanks for the stream. Thanks for trying to keep this topic in the spotlight. Slant. Thank you very much, Rick. Definitely 100%. Thank you very much for joining today. John Goss says, trying to get your attention. Please check this out. User content becomes copyright if Wizard goes on D&D Beyond if I read it right. Just like Open Game License 1.1. I'm not aware about the D&D Beyond. I assume though that for them to add on content into D&D Beyond probably is a bespoke agreement, right? Is it a bespoke agreement, or can they can just add it in? But thank you for saying that, John. I'll have to look into that. Let me just pop that on. D&D Beyond does content become Wizards of the Coast, WTCs. Okay. Aaron Dragon says, Dragonbean is coming out at the right time. To be fair, like, I do think that this is a good time to release a new RPG. I think we're at the height of people being willing to try new games, for sure. This is, like, the time. This is the time. Eric says, 3 of the 4 peeps in our groups are GMs, though only 2 of us are the primary GMs. It's a great situation to be in. Zach Willer says, would you only watch one genre of movie, play other systems? I agree, Zach. This is the same thing. I say this about wargaming. I say it about role-playing games. I think that variety is the spice of life. I think try all sorts of different stuff. I think it's a big hobby. There are tons of different things out there. I always recommend that people try a different variety of games. If anything, it keeps companies honest as well, right? I don't like hobbies cementing around a single company. I just don't like it. It allows companies to bully other companies. I don't like bullies, okay? So I think the best thing is for there to be a variety of games, to be competition within the market. That's good, right? To have different companies competing with one another, I think that's good. I think that's just straight up good. And so long as it doesn't cement along one monopoly institution, that's great. Evan Stafford says, just found your channel. I'm so glad I did. Keep this up. Well, thank you very much, Evan. I'm glad you found the channel too. This is my wargaming channel. Discourse Minis is my wargaming channel. I have a whatchamacallit, a role-playing game channel called Dungeons and Discourse. Check that out. It's Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Discourse. You can check that out. That is my role-play game focused one. It's Dungeons and Discourse, but it's not just Dungeons and Dragons. Too good a pun to pass up. It was just too good of a pun to pass up. Havoc Wargaming, how's it doing? Havoc Wargaming has a really fun YouTube channel. I totally recommend his channel. Says there's tons and tons of games. He checks out loads of different war games. If you're interested in getting into the wider world of wargaming, check out his channel. I totally agree. I think I think that we are in a golden age right now, people, of games. We're in a golden age of war games. We're in a golden age of role-playing games. We're in a golden age of board games. We're kind of like, there's been troubles right now with different companies kind of collapsing, right? There's been a little bit of a collapse in terms of the amount of different companies that are able to feasibly exist in the market. But I think that right now there has never been more choice of games at all. Now is the time to try out new stuff, because I've never seen it be this varied in what you can get access to, for sure. It is a really good time to be a gamer, let me tell you. It's a tumultuous time right now, and we'll see how this all shakes out with the open game license. Crypto Kev, thank you very much for the donation, says, I'm very much liking some of the new fan-made RPGs on the horizon I'm seeing. Also, is it true Games Workshop is now one of your Patreons? Yes, so you might have noticed that at the end of all my videos, I am saying thank you to the Games Workshop. That is because I have a Patreon tier where I give a shout out to my patrons. I think it's the captain tier that I shout out on my Patreon. One of my patrons is called Games Workshop. Now, I do suspect that they might not be the real Games Workshop, but they could be Kevin Roundtree. I don't know. But yeah, I shout them out at the end. It's not necessarily the company Games Workshop I'm thanking there. It is the Patreon. So my Patreon, by the way, is patreon.com/discourse and miniatures. If you are interested in that, I have like bonus videos. I have exclusive little live streams, like private little live streams, and I also have discount codes for My Mini Factory STL stores as well. So check that out. But yeah, so I have like a patron who I shout out. And they are called Games Workshop, and it has caused a lot of comments, which I think was the intention of Games Workshop. I think that was their intention, for sure, to have the dissonance of me saying to thank you, Games Workshop. Weird Guide 564, thank you very much for the donation. Says, you want a good alternative to D20 rules? Try Dungeons and Delvers Dice Pool Edition, sold on Big Game Emporium. My non-gamer wife likes it as it is so easy to play. If she can do it, anyone can. I do love games that are easy to get spouses in. It's one of like the prime candidates of getting somebody into gaming who wasn't previously into gaming. If you can try and get your partner into gaming, like for sure. There's a lot of war games similarly that I like to recommend because they're something that anybody can play. I like solo games and cooperative games. Dungeons and Delvers Dice Pool Edition sounds pretty interesting. I've never played it before, but thank you very much for the recommendation, Weird Guy. Thank you very much. So anyone out there, they're trying to get their spouse into games, maybe this is something to look into. So thank you very much. Not the real GW. What in the heresy, says Josh White? I'm sorry to say, but it could be. I'm not sure. They do send me threatening cease and desist letters all the time, but you know, I've just chalked that up to a bit of a lark, you know. The Redneck Gamer says, the sad part of this for me is that I've been using 5th edition as a way to get some of my students into TTRPGs for a year now. This is not a conversation I will have to have with them. So that, yeah, the Dungeons and Dragons has been really good for getting, I think, so firstly, by the way, good job. I think that role-playing games have a really awesome social component to them. I think they teach a lot of really good lessons about working together. I think they teach a lot of great skills, personal skills, like working together as a team, how to cooperate with people, how to negotiate, I think you get problem solving. You get so many awesome skills from role-playing games. I think they're great. I think they are really important. I think they have an educational aspect to them. It's just never ever sell them on the educational aspect because nobody wants to be educated. But I think they have that aspect. So well done getting people into TTRPGs. But yeah, I don't envy you this conversation for sure. I think that 5th edition is actually a really good gateway game. I do think that is the case. Now, I think that it's probably a little bit more mechanically heavy than most other games, which is kind of funny because it is marketed towards more casual players, and more casual players are probably going to bounce off the more mechanically heavy 5th edition. But overall, I think that it is a relatively accessible game for sure. And it kind of sucks that now you're going to have this conversation. So definitely feel for you there. Sibiot says, variety is the spice of life. 100%, I totally agree. Jason Wilson says, D&D Beyond becomes theirs as soon as Wizards of the Coast got it. Yeah, so I know that Wizards of the Coast did buy D&D Beyond, like for sure. And then now we're starting to see like cosmetic skins, dice skins, stuff like that. Although I think they might have been doing that before Wizards of the Coast got them. Somebody one says, and the spice must flow. The spice must indeed flow. I'm gonna reveal something, probably gonna get a lot of hate for this. I have not watched the new Doom. I have not watched the new Doom, but I'm looking forward to doing so. I will. When I get a moment, I will. When I get a moment, I will, because I've heard really good things. Calvo Vanoni says, we're in that game now, so based in reality, we can't tell if it's a Matrix. 100%. 100%. Her force says, Old School Essential is a very, very good D&D alternative. Yeah, there's a lot of OSR style games that are, the old school revival games, for those who don't know what those are, which are kind of reminiscent of the old school style of Dungeons and Dragons. And my worry is that a lot of these games are going to get hit by this new OGL 1.1, and a lot of them are going to get kind of intimidated by Wizards of the Coast. I'm really concerned for that, because the OSR, like the revival of the old school games, has been a really surprising thing to me, to be honest. As because I saw the kind of like rise of Dungeon World, and that made sense. These kind of very mechanically light games that were more about just kind of, I guess, the acting side of role playing. And so I was surprised when there was this huge revival of old school games, for sure. I don't dislike it at all, but I was really surprised by it. But this might hurt that entire industry a little bit. Although obviously, you get games like Mothership, for example, that are kind of, they go for the zines and the pamphlet style. They have the kind of aesthetics and the tactile nature of those types of games, but they have their own mechanics that are completely separate. There is no way you could argue anything about the open game license with them, but ultimately, I think that these changes to the open gaming license, it will have a chilling effect, not only on OSR games, but on everybody. I really do think it will have a chilling effect. People are gonna be, it's like it was mentioned to me, there's nothing more creatively draining than when you're midway through a sentence, and you're writing this creative piece, and then you gotta think, oh wait, am I gonna get sued for this? And there's nothing that disrupts the creative workflow more than that. So I think there's going to be this huge chilling effect on the industry. Octavius Dutolant says, with the OGL changes, do you think if a content creator speaks out against woke themes and updates in D&D, the Wizards of the Coast will be able to issue their 30-day notice to shut them down as a form of censorship? Well, thank you very much for the donation. I don't think that... firstly, okay, so content creator. The open game license is more focused on kind of content with a capital C. This isn't like aimed at YouTubers, right? Or commentators. This is aimed at content as in like somebody who makes supplement games. Okay? And I don't think that Wizards are going to use that to try and maybe, if they disagree with the statements being made by, say, a content creator with a capital C. So someone who, say, makes a supplement and then they later turn out to like have some wild opinions that Wizard of the Coast totally disagree with. I don't think Wizard of the Coast will use that to like shut them down. Now that said, I think that probably Wizard of the Coast do want to have the capacity to remove someone's license if they think that there is a game that has come out that harms their brand significantly, right? So for example, if a game comes out and it's just like super racist, it's just super racist, like unapologetically so. We've seen those types of games released in the past. And if it uses the license, Wizards of the Coast have kind of created themselves the capacity to prevent that game from getting released. And I think that is an upside from Wizards' perspective, for sure. But I don't think they're going to be going after many people for that. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think this is just for... I think I think the real reason why they want all content being made on the open gaming license is mostly so they can see how much money's being made by their competitors. Because these third parties who use the open gaming license are competitors, the Wizards of the Coast. And I think Wizards of the Coast, there's a lot of power in being able to see how much money you're making. This kind of reminds me of whenever Games Workshop, they used to supply Warhammer to these third party, like, independent stores, these hobby stores who would sell miniature war games, and they would be buying stuff from Games Workshop. What Games Workshop used to do in Britain, in the UK, was they would see which companies were selling the most stock, and they would go, okay, and then they would open a Games Workshop store in that area, in that town, because they knew there was a big market there for it. And I think that's what Wizards of the Coast really want to do. They want to see what's popular, what's not. They want more data. They want more data in order to create more stuff. Now, I do think that there probably is going to be some element of quality control, where they can say, no, this doesn't fit, what we want. I think it's more likely to be used against things like, say, maybe the Book of Erotic Fantasy, stuff like that, for example. But yeah, so I do think that there is a small element of Wizards wanting to be able to ensure that their brand isn't impinged upon by, kind of third parties. But I don't think that that's really the main impetus. Ultimately, these companies, all they care about is money. Like they don't care about, they don't have no values. Like they have no real values. Okay, they don't care. They don't actually have an opinion on it. Individuals in these companies might have opinions on stuff for sure. They might believe in equality and diversity and all this stuff. But they actually don't care. Like the company as a whole has one objective, and that is to make money. And if they think that public consensus is on one side, they will follow that. If they think public consensus is on another side, they will follow that. That is all they care about. These companies are mercenaries, and I don't think they care about brand quality. They want the quality control on their brand, but that's only because they don't want to be sued. They don't want to alienate potential customers, and they want to try and grab as much money from as many people as possible. They want to be seen as this weird niche kind of fringe thing, basically. So I think really the interest to them is to look at the books of other people, of their competitors, for sure. Scython Nilo, thank you very much for the donation. Says, as a long-time DM, I wonder if you've ever played a bard, because I can imagine how much preparation and in-game background knowledge it would take to properly DM a group with your bard in it. I have indeed played a bard. One of the first characters I played was a bard. Not the first character. The very first character I played, I think it was 3.5. I think it was Pathfinder, and I played a character, an expedition leader, and I had whatever class it was. I think I took the feat that allowed me to take NPC followers, and I had 100 followers with me. I think I just took the feat multiple times. So by the end, I had 100 followers. I was the expedition leader, and I named every single one of those NPCs. And I played an old man who was on a horse, and I couldn't walk very well. I was like really old. I did not get what D&D was about. I didn't realize like that it was going to be about going into dungeons and stuff. I thought I was just meant to be an expedition leader, so I made like a classic, white mustache kind of expedition leader who required like assistance from his followers to like get off and on horses, and would set up these lavish campsites and stuff. As far as I remember, that game didn't go well. But I had a lot of fun. But yes, I have played bards in the past. I love active role playing. My favorite types of games are sandbox games where you as a player get to determine what it is that you want to do. I'm a big believer in players getting a big influence on what the game is going to be about. I think that role-playing games are collaborative, and as a DM, I see, for myself, whenever I'm role-playing, I see myself more as simply a conduit for fate, just to intercede and to say when something has to happen, right? Like, you have to take a roll for X to see what the resolution of this is, but otherwise, I usually let the players direct me and tell me where they want to go, and we just go and do that, and we see how that goes. But yeah, I love bards. Bards are a lot of fun. They're very, very personable, very big characters, and I like big characters. Crypto Kev, another donation. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Says, at Scython Nilo, I played a gnome bard once. My first song in a tavern, I critically failed and got into a racist argument with her pet goblin. I was knocked out and left for dead in the snow. That's a bard story, all right. That is a bard story for sure. Telling a very risque, a very poor taste song, only to get kicked out of the tavern and left for dead. That definitely sounds like a bard story. But thank you very much for the donation. Let's see here. Let's see. I presumably says a game that pressed on in the face of satanic panic. Now worried about brand image. Yeah, right? Because the funny thing is, the satanic panic was good for Dungeons and Dragons, if I remember right. Like, surely, I think that was some really good publicity, wasn't it? I don't think that killed the game, did it? But I don't know. I wasn't around at that time. I haven't really looked too much into the satanic panic stuff. But I have to imagine it was kind of okay for the game. Scython says, that's amazing discourse. I'm glad you like it. My DM did not. Vitra says, hi everyone. Hey there, Vitra. Let's see here. Cellphone says Dark Heresy 2nd edition is a cool percentage decision, lots of room to flex. Yes, Dark Heresy was the first role-playing game I ever played. Because I played Warhammer first. I played Warhammer 40k first, and then I got into Dark Heresy. Aaron Dragon says bards are tasty snacks to dragons. Yes, they are. I actually did play. Oh, yes. So I did play a bard. I played it for. It was a 5th edition game. The Rise of Tiamat, or no, the other one, the one where you fight Tiamat at the end. And I was playing a bard, but I was playing a combat bard. I basically used my loot. I was this kind of like Russian kind of guy, this big, massive, really built dude, and I would hit people with my loot. That was like my way of making music. It was called Songs with Rocks in it. I stole it from Pratchett. And I would hit people with my loot. That was my bard. Phil Hollywell says currently playing Dark Heresy, a Forge World Tech Priest, and Pathfinder 1, a Kitsune Arcane Gunslinger. Should our GM... Oh no, I lost it. Oh no, I lost it. Should our GM for that group ever get a breath back from work? That's the killer. That's the killer of games. Is not getting enough time for sure. Jason Wilson says, losing customers doesn't make you money. So, yes and no. So, they are obviously trying... So, I think Wizards of the Coast strategy right now is to try and appeal to a wider demographic. They're basically more interested in onboarding more people as opposed to retaining existing players, if you get me. I think that they think that they're... So, this is the same thing that Games Workshop do, okay? So, you'll see a similar business style from these games, where essentially what their goal is, right? So, if you imagine... There's a churn of players. They believe that their core product is so good that people will play it no matter what, right? EA, video game companies, they operate the same thing. Their game is great. Their product is excellent, which means they don't need to worry about old people. Because the existing audience are going to play Dungeons & Dragons. How do you monetize your existing audience of Dungeons & Dragons? You release the next supplement book and they buy it. There, job's a good one, boss. The real goal is growth. How to get more people into the hobby. That is their big goal. That's why they're doing things like the movie and stuff like that, right? They're trying to create as much brand awareness as possible, trying to get people to onboard onto it as possible for sure. But what happens is, and this happens with Games Workshop, is if you treat your customers really badly, you can churn through them. People will leave. Now, Games Workshop, their core product is so monetized. Warhammer 40k is such an expensive game to play. It's so expensive that only a select group of people are able to afford to keep up with the game. Most people get into Warhammer, they stick around for a year or two, and then they leave because they cannot afford to keep up with the game that Games Workshop sells. Games Workshop is okay with that because while those people are playing Games Workshop games, they spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Wargaming, there is like a tenth of people playing war games compared to role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. But I guarantee the people who are into war games spend over 100 times more money because there's just so much more to buy from the core product. So Games Workshop are happy to churn through their customer base because they get one new person in. That new person is that's got to be lots and lots of money for Games Workshop. It's going to be lots and lots. They spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. They can squeeze you for, X amount for a year. They lose so much money out of you. Wizards of the Coast don't have the same luxury, shall we say, for lack of a better term, because people comparably don't spend as much money in role-playing games, and this is their problem. This is actually the problem they've identified. They don't like that. They don't like the idea that you as a player can get into Dungeons & Dragons and then never spend any money at all. They need you to spend, they want you to spend money. That's why they're saying that DMs account for 80% of all expenditure, because DMs are the ones who buy all the peripherals, they buy all the books, they get everybody onboarded into the game. Players flow through. So I don't think there's as much churn through Dungeons and Dragons the way that there is for Warhammer, but all the same, there is a little bit of churn, and those people in the hobby in that time aren't monetized as much. Now, what does more monetization mean? I actually think it increases churn. I think we're going to see more people drop out the more monetization goes up, but that doesn't matter because you can have 10 people drop out of the hobby and one person stay there. And if that one person is spending more money than those 10 people would have spent, who cares? Right? I mean, I care as someone who cares about the hobby and the health of the hobby, right? But Wizards of the Coast don't. Wizards of the Coast don't care about the health of the hobby. They care about the health of their profit margins. They care about the health of their profits. That's all they care about. Their interests. This is something I say all the time with Games Workshop. It is true of Wizards of the Coast. It is true of most companies. The interest of game publishing companies is not the same as players. Our goals are sort of at loggerheads a little bit. What we should want is a bigger hobby with more people playing it. We should have good games that keep to the spirit of the thing, and games that are fun to play. Good games that are fun to play. That's all that I care about. I want good games. But that's not the same thing that a game publishing company is more interested in. The bigger they are, the more they get more interested in just trying to maximize profit out of those. It's just how it goes. It's how these big public companies operate. But thank you very much for the donations there. I saw there was a couple of donations. Let's see here. Scython, thank you very much for the donation. Inu Button says, with a donation of $2 Canadian, says some of this is aimed at Paizo and new TSR, etc. Yeah, like for sure. But thank you very much for the donation. Dollar sign says Evan. Let's see here. Crypto Kev, thank you very much for the donation. With the gnome bard there. And then we got another donation there from Enu Button with the $5 Canadian. Says, if Wizards of the Coast tries to suppress the Book of Erotic Fantasy and the Book of Carnal Knowledge, they'll run into legal trouble with the Goblin Smut Overlord, Lurie Flint. You can't put it down. There'll be no way. I think the Book of Erotic Fantasy is here to stay. There's no way you can set that down. It'll be that Streisand effect. You try to put that thing away, it'll just blow up. It'll blow up. There's no way you can stop that thing. And funny enough, actually, so this is kind of like a little bit like the Streisand effect, where an attempt to clamp down on the third-party community is going to maybe result in a lot more purchases, sales, like temporary sales for it for now. Phil Hollywell says, I go nowhere near 40k wargaming. I don't doubt for a second I've got the dice to fuel a whole galactic war, but nowhere near the skills to paint the minis. I'll stick to rolling a D100 tab very much. Here's the thing, painting minis is not as hard as you might think, actually. Painting minis isn't that bad. I would recommend picking up, like, if you are very slightly interested, minis can be really easy to paint. I actually have some cute little snotlings here. These are little goblin dudes. I don't know if you'll be able to see them very well. Here, I'm still in the middle of painting him. That's why his little trumpet is white. But I have a little goblin dude. This wasn't too bad. Literally just a single paint of it's Warpstone Lightning, a contrast paint. You slap it on the skin and it does the job. It does everything for you. It's all it is. Just slap on a bit of paint, and it's really not that bad, honestly. Painting minis, I think that the people think that painting minis is really hard because of like Instagram and all these kind of influencers who are painting really, really good minis. You don't need to do that. Just do what I do. Be really bad at painting and just be happy with it and have fun. That's my recommendation. That is my recommendation with painting minis. Walter Star says they only care about quarter by quarter growth in profits and nothing else. 100% true. And obviously you can get that by getting more people in. You can get that by, selling more products. You can get that by keeping your existing customers happy, but ultimately, if they can find a more innovative way of doing it, they will do that. The Book of Carnal Knowledge, says the Redneck Gamer, reminds me of a friend's character, the Kender Panty Thief, Victoria's Secrets. My goodness, Kender. Kender aren't too bad. I think Kender can be interesting. I just think they have to be role-played in a certain way. They roleplay in a certain way. Vitra says, I'm playing a half-elf wild variant from Skag, Outlander background, Kensai monk with long swords and longbows. Well, I hope you're having fun, Vita. I hope you're having fun. That's what this is all about. It's all about having fun. That's all that matters. Zoe Humphrey says, they're counting on those who accept 1D will stay once they're in, since they have theoretically spent enough money after a time they don't want to leave, and then Wizards of the Coast has them. This happens with Warhammer as well. This happens with video games, where you have this sunk cost. You get invested in the ecosystem, and you're like, I don't want to play anything, right? You think it is hard to convince people to play games other than 5th edition? Think about, and all they have done is maybe bought a player's handbook and maybe had to look at the rules and learn the rules a little bit. Good luck convincing them to play another game whenever they've invested thousands and thousands of pounds, or even £100, even £200, £300 into this system. There's going to be no hope. There's going to be no hope in playing another game. Ebon says, what do you mean I have to renew my D&D subscription just to play my Tabaxi? I think that a subscription-based model, recurring revenue, is very likely for Dungeons & Dragons in the future. Companies all over the place, you'll see this. This is really big right now. Recurring revenue is like the thing. Do you remember like 20 years ago, I'm showing my age here, do you remember like 20 years ago when everybody was trying to make an MMO because World of Warcraft did really well? Or do you remember when everybody was making like a Dota, like a MOBA clone? Or everybody made Doom back in the 90s, everybody was making first-person shooters. This is what that is. Everybody is seeing recurring revenue from streaming services, and everybody wants monthly transactions because it is nice and safe. Monthly transactions are nice and safe. What they mean is they can give you some degree of consistent income, and you do not have to worry about selling a product. You can have 1 month that's bad, 1 month that's good, and you'll still make a similar amount of money thanks to recurring revenue streams. We see this with Games Workshop. They are trying to sell Warhammer Plus. They are trying to sell that every single month. Dungeons & Dragons, you bet your bottom dollar. They are going to go for a subscription-based model. Personally, I hate subscription-based models. I hate the idea that you will own nothing and be happy. I hate the idea that I have to rent everything. I like to own things. I like to buy books. I like to put them on my bookshelf. I want to own them. I do not want to have to rent access to anything, and it can be taken away at a later stage. The terms of service can update, and I either have to just accept that or not use it anymore, even though I've invested tons of cash in it. I hate to rent my apartment. I hate it to rent my apartment. So I do not want to rent things. I want to own them. I want to own them, and it feels like we just don't get to own anything these days. Role-playing games are one of the few things where you can buy the book. You get a copy of the physical book. It's why I love board games. It's why I love physical games on the table. I want the tactile experience. I want to be able to own them. I detest the idea of having to subscribe to these things, but it's the way the wheel is turning. All these companies want it because it means a recurrent revenue stream for them, and it's something they can point to. Subscriber numbers are going up. It's something they can point to. It's free money for them. They create the product once and they get money forever. They get money forever. They don't have to keep up with it. It's different from Patreon, for God's sake. Oh, with my Patreon, I do stuff for it. I make videos every day. With Wizards of the Coast, all they need to do is go, you get access to the player's handbook, you gotta pay us $5 a month. That's free money. There is nothing on that. And not only that, that's why they like to go on to royalty streams as well. That's why Games Workshop are going into royalties. It's why Wizards of the Coast are looking to license out their IP as much as possible. Because that too is free money. There's nothing to actually produce there. There's no costs that are incurred. There's a little bit of light taxes in the UK, but aside from that, you can just license out and make money. It's free money. It's free real estate. They can fit so much money in this bad boy to mix up my memes. But yeah, so the companies love this. I'm not a big fan. I am a big advocate for being able to own stuff, and yeah. That is what I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of being able to own things. Andrew Mento Mato says, do you like OSR systems or other RPG games you like to play? I haven't played a lot of OSR games, but I want to get into them. And I was just talking about this game, Fantasy Trip. Maybe you'll see it here. This is from Steven Jackson Games. This is the old 1979 game. It's basically like GURPS, but before GURPS. I heard about this game from Jim Murphy, who was Matt Colville's old dungeon master, and he recommended it, so I checked it out on his recommendation. Because I'm a big fan of GURPS, the generic universal role-playing game system. Also, the worst name ever for an RPG. Can we please take a second just to acknowledge that GURPS is a terrible name? They should have called it, I don't know, they should have called it the, multiverse? What was the, what's the, okay, right. Maybe never mind. I was gonna suggest another name. I can't remember what the name was that they call their bespoke setting. But yeah, I haven't played a lot of OSR systems. I am looking forward. I have played like Fantasy Trip once. I played it on like a grid with little chips, which was really cool. So I'm looking forward to playing like the bigger version of the game. Let's see here. Let me go scroll to the bottom. Here we go. Tyler Sandy says, the worst part of recurring payment models is that it has become so commonplace among new coming in will just accept it at face value. I'm worried about that as well. People who are coming into it, see, the standards can change. The standards can change in these things. What was unacceptable to people before will become just the norm. It'll be normalized in the hobby for sure. Because, I mean, like I said, I've mentioned it in previous videos. For example, horse armor was cosmetic options for horses in Skyrim. It was Skyrim, wasn't it? It was Skyrim. Or was it the one before that? I don't know. But in any case, it was for an Elder Scrolls game. And basically, people laughed at it. They thought it was insane trying to sell cosmetic options for a horse. But you look at video games today, everybody accepts the idea of cosmetic skins. In fact, now you have people arguing that cosmetic skins is like one of the least predatory ways of monetizing a game. But it was insane to monetize it before. And that's what we're going to see. We're going to see people just accept the recurring revenue stream. Oh, it's only like, I mean, and it might even be pretty affordable. It might be like $2 a month for the player's handbook. It might only be $2 a month for the player's handbook. Oh, like after 10 months, you know, by that stage, it would cost you 10 months to play it. And that's how they could really sneak it in. But the thing is, it's $2 a month. That is unlimited potential for money. And they guarantee that money from everybody involved, right? Right now, people can share a single player's handbook. You're probably not going to share a subscription with your table. You're probably instead all going to have a subscription on your phones. So it's more money for Wizards of the Coast, right? That's what I kind of worry about. Steph says, I hate streaming services for this reason too. Yeah, I just don't like them. Evan Westbrook says, it's free real estate. It is indeed. Zombie Hamster says the level of control they would have over their customer would be that of master and servant. The OGL was actually the rings of power, it seems. One D&D to rule them all. Tail says subscription services are an oversaturated market. I agree. There's only so much I can afford. I've actually had to. I'm thinking about canceling my Netflix soon because it's just like there's too much stuff out there. There's too much stuff out there. I can't afford them all. Sylvia Adamala, thank you very much for the donation. £2 says, would you play diceless RPGs like Nobilis, etc.? In theory, yes, but I've never played one before. I've never played a diceless RPG. That sounds really interesting. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I would. To be honest, I will play anything. Like, I will try anything at least once. You know, there are games I played I didn't like. There's games I played I really liked and I thought I wouldn't like it. I'm up for trying anything. I would totally play a diceless RPG. I'm just curious, how does it work? Do they use cards or how do they randomize like the sort of the scenario? How do they do that? Ken says GURP should have just been called erotic fantasy. I mean, you can definitely do that in the game. I'm not sure if that would have been the best, most descriptive name. GURPS, the best system, says Jeremy Walls. I think it's really good. I think it's it gets, people say, I think that it's overstated how complicated it is. I think as a system, it's just 3d6. Your GM decides whether or not it works or not. I think it's a really good system. The Corby says, that version the same as the original Fantasy Trip. Yes, so the version I just showed there, that is a Legacy Edition. That is the original Fantasy Trip. I also got 2 solitaire adventures as well that I can play by myself. I play myself. They're little solitaire adventures, which sounds really fun. Skyrim, yes, so it happened in Skyrim. Let's see here. Cry Havoc, Wargaming says, Chaosium had the generic idea earlier, but they didn't really do it right until long after GURPS. Yes, Chaosium, they do have an open game license too. Don McCleary, thank you very much for the $5 donation. Says, haven't spent $1 with them since 4th edition came out. They are not a game company anymore. They are a corporation that happens to make games. I totally get that attitude. For sure, Don. I really do get that attitude. Because I mentioned this earlier, but people have forgotten that all of this stuff with the open gaming license, it happened with 4th edition. I mentioned it before. This has all happened before. Here is something you might want to know. I'm thinking about doing a video on this, but 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, it had its own virtual tabletop system back in 2007. People forget this. This is like a circle. We're going full circle. We're back in the halcyon days of 2007. Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition was originally announced. It was called D&D Insider, and it originally was going to have a subscription-based service where you would get free magazines every single month, and new content and new supplements for a subscription fee, and there was going to be a virtual tabletop system that you had to pay money to get access to, and it meant you could play on the virtual tabletop. This all fell through. I'm not 100% sure why. I'm going to be investigating as part of a video, but it all fell apart. However, where are we right now? We are in the exact same scenario. 4th edition, they tried to update the open game license into a more restrictive style of license, and everybody hated it. Pathfinder rose up. What have we got right now? Open game license getting changed into being really bad. We have a virtual tabletop system that was being made so that Wizards of the Coast could try and centralize the hobby around themselves. What do we got? We got one D&D and a virtual tabletop system, a game system that is being designed from the ground up to be playable in a virtual tabletop system. What do we have? We have a subscription-based model. One D&D, we're going to have a subscription-based model. The only thing that has changed is that they have learned some lessons from 4th edition. They know how to do it better. And better is in air quotes there, by the way. What I mean by better is more effective, more effectively monetized than last time. It's just, this is the way of things. This is the way of things now. Enu Button, thank you very much for the donation of $5 Canadian, says, I think it was the 5th age of Dragonlance that tried a card-based system. Still TSR now, Wizard of the Coast, but it's a proof of concept if nothing else. I kind of love the idea of a card-based system. That does sound really interesting. I have, there are war games that I have played that use card-based systems. Mad Dogs with guns, and I want to try a game called Malifaux as well, but I have never ever in all my life have I ever played a role-playing game with a card-based system. Now, that said, would you count Gloomhaven? Right? Gloomhaven is a board game, sure, but it has a lot of kind of card elements, and it uses a card system to tell you the modifiers used. I kind of like cards, because with cards, one of the nice things about cards is that you have a limited degree of probability, right? What I mean by that is, you roll a dice, you can get any number. You roll a dice, you get 20, you roll a dice again, you're just as likely to get 20. With cards, it's different. With cards, you can kick a crit success out of the deck, you can score it, you can put it in a discard pile, now you're less likely to get another crit success. It allows you to game the system a little bit more. I think there's interesting game mechanics there. But thank you for letting me know about that, Unibatten. Thank you very much. Crypto Kev, thank you very much for the donation. Says, are you hydrating discourse? You stretching enough? I grew up in Warhammer Fantasy, role-playing old world, and cry at night with the kids growing up with microtransactions, thinking this is okay for paper RPGs. I'm hydrating. I've got some cold tea. I got some cold tea here. I'm always stretching. I basically, what do you think I'm doing with my hands when I talk on the videos? But yeah, so I kind of grew up just before the microtransaction stuff, and then I kind of evolved alongside it, which is why I'm so cynical and bitter. But yeah, I think it's sad, kind of the kind of how monetization has become. Like, monetization was something I never used to worry about in video games. It used to be, you'd buy a game for £30, you get the game, and that was it. Jobs are good and boss. But it just feels like every single, like, no, it's just not enough, is it? They just can't sell a product. Now they need to continually think of ways to optimize the profit. It gets to be too much. So I totally feel you there, Crypto Kev. I totally feel you. Corey Johnson, thank you very much for the $5 donation, says, with Dawn on this one, still using 3.5 rule set because I got about 40 or so books on sale when they switched to 4.0. Smiley face. Yeah, I know people who still stick with 3.5. I know people who argue that 3.5 is still, to this day, the best. Like 5th edition doesn't touch it. Like 3.5 is just the best edition. That's what they know. That's what they want to play. So I totally get you. I totally get you for sure. It's the game I started with. It's the first Dungeons & Dragons game I started with, anyway. First Dungeons & Dragons game I played. And I never actually played 4th edition. No one was interested. No one was interested at all. Wow, thank you very much for the $20 Canadian donation there with a Parker. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. That's very kind of you. RV Dammit says, Amber Dice List doesn't use random resolution. Characters have a either better or worse, and will always win lose unless proper planning is invoked. Interesting. Is it the DM who decides, or how does it? That is interesting to me. I would worry if I was a DM. I would worry about being seen. See, I like leaving it to dice sometimes because I don't want to be seen as like saying yes or no. You can or cannot do that. I like to just leave it up to fate and chance. For sure. Samuel Roberts says, I'm with those guys at 3.5 rocks. Tyler Santa says, 3.5 is the best D&D, though. Shadowland Pub, Understreet DH, West End had a card-based RPG. It sucked and killed the company. Okay, well, that wasn't what I had in mind. That wasn't what... That wasn't what I was expecting. Yvonne Westbrook says 5th edition smooths out 3.5's crunchiness. I know. So I played 3.5 edition, but I didn't have like... I wasn't like an optimal player. I'm not one of those players who like gets really interested in the mechanics and tries to optimize a character. I think the closest I ever got to like an optimal character in 5th edition was a fighter who had attacks of opportunity with their polearm, was a polearm master and was good at like attacking of opportunity, but it was just kind of for fun. Usually I build the idea of the person and then I kind of sort them into the class. But I have played, I play with people who are really into the mechanic side of things, and they loved 3.5. Specifically, they loved all the millions of supplements for 3.5, and being able to like pick these insane class combos to create these just bizarre, fanciful characters that could do whatever they needed them to do. There was just these really overpowered, like White Room style characters that were just like absolutely insane. I've seen some weird character builds for sure. The Corby asks, anyone shout out RuneQuest yet? No, actually, no one has actually shouted out RuneQuest yet, which does feel like a bit of a shame, doesn't it? It does feel like a bit of a shame. Luddite says, Amber, yes, the DM has all the power. I never made it work in a session. Okay, so that makes me a little bit nervous. I don't think I'd want to play a game. If I was like a DM, especially. As a player, it's different. Actually, I wouldn't mind it. But as a DM, I wouldn't want all the power to determine whether or not something did or did not succeed. I'd be a little bit nervous about that. Cry Havoc Wargaming says, I started with AD&D myself. I am ancient. Venerable is a better word, I think. Venerable is a great word for it. It's one I'm beginning to slowly acclimatize to. Red Oboris says, a problem with D&D 3.5 is that it can make it very hard for the DM where the users could break their game and make it unplayable. 100% that was a problem. You need a DM who knows the system, I think. I think you need a DM who's also on the ball. I think if I were to DM 3.5, I would leave myself open to some abuse for sure. Because I wouldn't know, like, what's an insane. I wouldn't know what to agree and what to disagree with. Of course, any DM can kind of limit and say, no, just only stuff on the core. But I feel like there's so much stuff out there for 3.5. It feels like a shame not to let people get access to it, you know? K-Dog says, AD&D was never broken. Still don't know why they thought they should fix it. The second edition was okay, but it doesn't touch the parts AD&D reached. Ruby Mad Hatter says, honestly, Pathfinder 1st edition is a far better game than 3.5, in my opinion. It's fair. That's fair. I think a lot of my friends would agree. Crab at Wargaming says RuneQuest was the original base for the Chaosium system. Yes, and they republished, I think, recently. RuneQuest Chaosium did. I think they republished it recently. I actually think that this whole open gaming license thing. I hope that what happens is that people go on to play more games. Like, I hope that this starts conversations at tables everywhere where people start to converse about whether or not they want to play in a different system. If even just to convert things over into, like, Pathfinder, for example. I really hope that is the case. And I hope that people actually use this as an opportunity to try some different games that they wouldn't otherwise try. You know, try out a Call of Cthulhu, which is just so different from a Dungeons & Dragons game. Try some Dungeon World. Try some OSR. Tried some Shadow of the Demon Lord. Try some new stuff. I hope that tables use this as an opportunity, which I think is probably the biggest thing that Wizards of the Coast have done that I don't think they intended to do. They have accidentally created the impetus for tables all around the world to begin talking about whether or not they should continue to play Dungeons and Dragons. And even if half of the tables say, we're not going to change things, even if 90% of the tables say, we're not going to change things, that is still 10% of tables who will move on to another game and maybe fall in love with a different system. And that's really bad for Wizards. And I think that has been, it is an act of hubris, I think, from them. This does scream hubris, doesn't it? There's an arrogance about these changes. Vampire the Masquerade, says Johnny Idiot. It's wild to me that not as many people are talking about Vampire the Masquerade, because I remember when Vampire the Masquerade was like the game. It was the game you played. If you played a game, you played the Vampire the Masquerade was massive for a while there in the 90s. It was crazy big, even in the 2000s when I was playing games. Most of the people I knew played World of Darkness, but these days it doesn't seem to get much of a look in. I really like World of Darkness. I recommend World of Darkness. Specifically, I liked the Vampire the Requiem. I like those ones. They're a little bit more open. Evan Westwood says, tables around the world. Do we really need a D&D? Yeah, exactly, right? People are going to start questioning the status quo, which is not good if you are the status quo. You do not ever want to be questioned if you are the status quo. You want to rely on the inertia. This is going to get people to start thinking about things, to start talking about things, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous. Nope Nos says Viking Death Squad and Index Card RPG. I've never heard of that one. Rich Asphalt says each edition has some really cool stuff and some really bad stuff. Each has to be measured on its own, but not Mom always like X Best Edition Wars. You play you, boom. No, I agree. So this is the thing with 1D&D, for example. I think some people wrote off a lot of the criticism of 1D&D originally as just like edition wars, because this happens every single time there's a new edition. People are like, oh, I don't like this. Like even between 4th and 5th, when 5th edition was coming up, people were like, nah, I don't like the idea of this. But 5th edition ended up being pretty popular and people liked it. And I think there was a tendency at the beginning of things to kind of write off some of the criticism of 1D&D as just like, this is just edition wars, that people don't like change. This is, the kind of classic. But I think that 1D&D is uniquely different. It is uniquely bad. And I think that the OGL changes is kind of one of the indications that is the case. Like that's a pretty substantial change. For sure. Taylor Stan says, Discus Minis, my friend got us banned from a Vampire the Masquerade LARP. Okay, right, I'm gonna finish this comment. Don't make me regret it. For killing someone's character, making them cry. Okay, that's not too bad. I've heard some real horror stories, let me tell you, when it comes to some Vampire the Masquerade games. Demonetizable stuff. That's not too bad. Sorry to hear someone cried though. Vampire the Masquerade LARPs were like really big. People don't know this. So, like it kind of was alongside the emo and goth culture of like the late 90s, early 2000s. LARPing for Vampire the Masquerade was like really big. Everyone would get their makeup on and like put their hair and like put it down. Like this, like in like in Spider-Man 3, right? And they would dance down the street towards the abandoned warehouse they've rented out so that they can all pretend to be vampires and go at one another. To be honest, count me in. To be frank, I would love to try those out. I said earlier I'd love to do a LARP, but they were really big. They were really big for a while there, for sure, and some wild things would happen at them. Twilord says, first live stream of yours that I have seen, I believe. Totally not trying to make a Digimon game line in the style of World of Darkness right now. Well, hey, there you go. This is one of those things, actually, this is what the open game license kind of encouraged, and I think we're probably going to see a change in this, which is basically someone saying something to the effect of, for example, there was The Secret World is an MMO. It was all about mystery and intrigue and research and investigation and politics. And they made a supplement game. They made a role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game, and they made it as a Dungeons & Dragons compatible game. They used it under the open game license. And that didn't make any sense, right? Because the themes of Dungeons and Dragons are so far apart from the Secret World. And you see this with tons of different stuff, like Digimon, right? Like, it wouldn't really work it's not a Dungeons and Dragons game. But people made it under the open game license because it's the only way to make any amount of money whatsoever. So the kind of fragmentation of this means that games and companies that would have made games that maybe wouldn't suit being made in a Dungeons and Dragons style system maybe won't be made on a Dungeons and Dragons style system now. They won't use the open game license for fear. But on the other hand, it might also just mean they just don't get made, which is the kind of like the flip of that coin, right? Which is the kind of bad part, the really sad bit about that. Rich Asphalt, Rich Aspeland Jr. says, White Wolf, we could never get the entire crowd to agree on one game, so we always played much games with mages, fae, garu, and vamps. It was so WWE on LSD. That is the real classic. My favorite spot was Hunter. I like playing as a normal human dude, just trying to hunt supernaturals. And we usually did agree on a single game, like we'd all play vampires, or we'd all play mages, or we'd all play hunters. But we did play one that was like a bunch of different supernatural monsters. I basically played I played George Clooney. It was a heist game, and we were trying to basically rob the technomancy, I think it was, their banks. And I was a human, and I was getting the gang together. We had a werewolf, we had a vampire, we had a demon, and they were all basically robbing banks, and it was a ton of fun. It was like a heist game. That was a lot of fun. I wish that game had lasted longer, but it kind of imploded. Tyler Stanley says, no, it wasn't anything bad. The person was being confrontational to us, so my friend initiated a combo with them, killed the character, and we got banned. What's the point then? Couldn't you do combat? Can you do combat? Let's see. Jason Higgins says, no, they're having a conversation. Larpia says, Vampire the Masquerade, not VM. VM, what's that? VM Varga. Arthur Illid says, do you think that a new RPG system could get brought into limelight with all the D&D drama? Maybe. I don't see it. I don't know who that would be. So no one has quite emerged right now, but there's still everything to play for. To be honest, if I was head of marketing for a game system right now, like Paizo or like say Chaosium, if I was the head of marketing at Chaosium, I think now might be the time to start putting some money into advertising, because I think now is a good time to maybe try and grasp it. You know what I'd be doing? I'd be like, the most popular game in Japan comes to you today. Get all the otakus on, And they'd be like, oh, I'm going to roleplay as a 19th century gentleman. Cthulhu by Gaslight. I think that now is an opportunity for some games to get a lot more on board a lot of people. Because people want to try other stuff. BCMI Berserker says, hey, Discourse, enjoying your work. Keep fighting the good fight. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you've enjoyed the combat. Honestly, the level of support has been absolutely insane. I want to thank you all for watching the content. Like, it's been absolutely crazy. The amount of views, the amount of people that have said, been commenting and stuff. It's been absolutely positively awesome. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a lot of fun. It's been absolutely insane. Obviously the situation sucks, but it's meant that I've met so many cool people, and that is really awesome. Corey Johnson, thank you very much for the $2 donation. Says, what we do in the shadows is a LARP gone bad. A LARP gone good, surely. Come on, what we do in the shadows is a LARP gone good. Arthur Illett says, I would love to see the cyber system get some love. love. This is the thing. There's a lot of talk about the like different systems. Honestly, I think that most people, like most kind of casual, at the very least people, are less interested in systems and more interested in like pitches. By that I mean, I don't think you're going to get people on board with, say, playing Vampire the Masquerade by saying, oh, it has a very interesting D10 system that allows you to use different powers, and, you know, it's got a nice push and pull, it's got a hunger mechanic. I don't think people are really interested in that so much as you pitch it as, it is a game where you play as vampires and you stalk the night hunting for prey. I think that gets people, like, more like, oh, super psyched up. And it's because the D&D pitch is always, you get to play in this fantasy world. When people are, imagine, I think that as a jaded gamer who's been around for so long, I forget this sometimes, but to a casual person who's never played D&D before, played any role-playing game, to say to them, you sit at a table and you play this fantasy person who's in this wide fantasy world, and you fight monsters, and you go on quests, and you rescue people from dungeons, and you see villages, and people are like, okay, cool, this sounds like a really fun game. This sounds like my actions matter, and I get to make changes on the world, and it responds to me, and we're fighting monsters. And that's what people are excited about. So it's not like the D20 system is necessarily what people are really married to. I think they get married to the D20 system because that's what D&D uses, and most people are pitching D&D to people who don't play games. But and there's this cultural phenomenon of, I want to try out D&D. People are married to the D20 system, right? I think that they can be the 3D6 system, the D10s, there's all sorts of different systems out there. But I to be honest, I think that what we should start hearing are some pitches from some other games for sure. Obviously, there's been tons of conversations already on stream about some really awesome games. People talk. I think as gamers, we're sort of tempted to talk about systems. Oh, this game is better than this game because maybe it's a more effective system. It's harder to optimize. It's less abusable, or it's more fun. It's more engaging. People don't really. I think that most people who are just like casual players, they just want to hear about like what's actually really cool about those systems. And actually, I think I think I'm gonna do a video probably on some new systems to try. Maybe because I like to talk about different games and stuff. Maybe I think we'll probably do a video on that at some stage. Maybe next week we'll probably come up with a video on that. So thanks very much for the idea, guys. Zach Willer says, what we do in the shadows is the reality of what Mind's Eye Theater looks like. I still want to roleplay in a LARP. I still want to do it. Mage was solid, says Corey Johnson. I like Mage. Crypto Kev says, Discourse is Welsh from Ballymuff. I think I am not Welsh. I'm not Welsh. I kind of like keeping the mystery of where I'm from, but I do frequently reveal it. Like on the stream, for example. I'm actually from Northern Ireland. Which gives me this accent that people find really difficult to place. They find it really difficult to place me because we just, we just don't have a lot of exposure in popular media, I don't think. Because we're a really small place. Drew Tashkin says, what we do in the shadows is more realistic. Velanuka says, subscription for us with scheduling problems? We doomed. Oh, God. Yeah, you're right, Philip. Yeah, oh, God. Trying to get a game in, half the party hasn't shown up, and the guy who has the subscription is the one who doesn't show up. Damn. You're in big trouble there. Unit Batten, thank you very much for the donation, the $5 Canadian donation. Says, a role-playing game based on furries equal $$. But really, I'd love to try the game system of the Record of Lotus War. I actually don't know Record of Lotus War. I don't know. I do agree, though, that a role-playing game based on furries probably would do lots of dollars. The furry community has a lot of... I know some artists, and all I'm saying is the furry community has a lot of money to spend on stuff. Let me tell you that right now. They would be all about the peripherals. They live for that peripheral lifestyle. I think there is already, though, isn't there? There's definitely some. I think they tend to be more on the cutesy side of things, where you can play as animals, burrows and badgers, right? Or is that a war game? I can't remember. Savage World Rifts, says Daniel Gallant. Savage World Rifts. Garzini says, how many people here have played more than one game of Paranoia? I have played more than one game of Paranoia. What a game it is indeed. For those who don't know, Paranoia is a really fun game where you play as part of this dystopian landscape in the future where Friend Computer is in charge of everything, and Friend Computer has gone busted over the years and is terrified of communists and spies, but the world is like an irradiated wasteland outside. You live in these bunkers, and Frankenputer is just you. It's this Kafka-esque kind of almost comedic game where you're given tasks such as test this new equipment, but then you get the equipment and it's too high level security clearance, so you don't get to know what it does, and you have no idea what the equipment is. And if you do not test it correctly, then the Frankenputer will kill you. It's absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love the game. It's really bizarre. Half the game is trying to blame others on the failure of the party. It's the debriefing by Frankenputer and trying to blame everybody else for things going wrong. It's a ton of fun. I would really recommend it. Curtis Thompson, thank you very much for the $2. Says, as a furry, guilty as charged. LOL. It's true. It's true. It's true. Nope. No says record of Lewis War equals Sword World for the people that don't know. I've never heard of it before, but thank you for letting me know. I don't know what that is. What is Sword World? It's like your answer has created more questions for me. I don't know what that is. Zombie Hamster says record of Ludus War started off as a D&D session that they recorded. Oh, okay. So I'm guessing this is like an actual play. Is this an actual play? I'm guessing so. Alright, so, Don McCleary says, many games of paranoia. Look, here's what I suggest, guys. Here's what I suggest. If you are at a table, and your table right now is talking about this, use it as an opportunity to maybe play a one-shot of a different game you wouldn't otherwise play. You don't need to end your D&D game, but maybe take a session or two to try out a new style of game. You know, try a Call of Cthulhu game, try a horror one-shot, try something new. You never know, you might end up having a ton of fun. That would be my recommendation, to take this time. Leslie Lippert says Burrows and Budget is a tabletop war game. Yeah, I couldn't remember. Zombie Hamster says, love me some paranoia. Everybody dies. Yeah. For sure. Now, obviously, there's some games that are really complicated, hard to learn, but there's lots of games out there. Literally, I played Mothership last night. All you need to know is roll D100, get underneath your stat, you're fine. Get over your stat, you fail. That's it. The actual character sheet is just a flowchart. It's so easy to build. Takes 5 minutes to build. Takes 3 minutes to learn. You're done and you're dusted, and suddenly you're fighting aliens. I totally recommend it. All sorts of different games out there that are really good. In fact, I am going to do a video on this. You've got me. You've got me, chat. Beholder says, I'm waiting on the Mothership Kickstarter to fulfill. I'm looking to make a small break from fantasy status and just try some smaller RPGs. Now is the time. Now is the season for sure. Sean Vieira says, never wrong with being Irish. I'm Canadian from Jamaica with English, Irish, Welsh, German, Portugal heritage. That's a big soup right there, Sean. That's a big soup. Get that. I like to see a little tinge of Irish in there, though. I like to see it. GM Hallman, thank you very much for the £5 donation. Says, if you want a horror game, I do, James, I do. Says, look at Unhallowed Metropolis, a game of futuristic Victorian steampunk zombie hunters. Unhallowed Metropolis. Let me write that down and check that out. That's Unhallowed Metropolis. Thank you very much for the suggestion there. That's really cool. I will check that out. Crypto Kev, thank you very much for the $5 donation that says, I lived in Erie for a few years and their accent was thick. This is me being understandable. So the way I speak, I worked with a lot of Americans for a while. I worked for a big international organization, and I worked with a lot of Americans, so this is my accent, which has been distilled and refined for the American palate. However, I do have a much thicker Northern Irish accent that I can employ, although it's getting more increasingly difficult for me to employ it. But you just wouldn't understand. You just wouldn't understand what I'm doing. Luddite, thank you very much for the £5 donation and that cheeky little emo. Look at that. It's a cute little pair doing a celebrate. You're making me really thirsty, actually. You're really thirsty. Actually, I probably do need to drink. I need to drink some sort of hydration liquid of some kind. I think they usually tend to call it water. But I will, so that means that I think we're edging towards the end of the stream, guys. I think we're edging towards it. If you have any questions, now is the time to get that in. If you have any questions about the OGL, if you have any questions about the OGL 1.1a, if you have any questions about 1D&D or what you think is going to happen, if you have any questions about any game systems, let me know and I will do my best to answer them. But otherwise, I think we're going to start to slowly wind down here. Learn Music, can we have a sample of the Northern Irish accent? No, that's for that is for my cameo only. When I can. No, I can't do it right now. It would destroy my throat. It would destroy my throat. Because I have to go there now. I used to speak like that very, very normally. But I would be embarrassed to do it on stream, so I'm not going to. Twilord says it's the northern part she is mortified by. Normal Ireland is one of the least embarrassing English-speaking countries to be from. You can get away with it. Yeah, you go anywhere in the world and you say you're Irish, you get a place at the table. It's pretty nice. We get the bank on our neutrality. It's sick. For sure. Thank you very much for the follow there. And Pian Cabal, thank you very much for the donation. The $5 Canadian says paranoia equals Brazil plus 1984 plus Logan's Run. That is a great example. Have you seen Mothership? I haven't seen, if there's like a movie called Mothership, I have not seen it. No. What adventure did you play in Mothership, says Encore Figures? I did not run it, I played in it, and it was one where we went to this asteroid. I don't want to spoil it because it was an actual play. You can go to the gaming materialists and you can see it played live there. And it was really fun. I played Bob Berkeley, assistant to the regional manager. Just here trying to make my way through corporate. But we went to like this mining asteroid station to repair some equipment, and some spooky shenanigans was going on. It was a ton of fun. I think it was one of the core like pre-made adventures. Twin Cast, thank you very much for the €2 donation. Says Japanese been reading replays of RPGs for decades. So they've been listening to actual plays then. Really? That's fascinating. I have no idea. I had no idea at all. Honestly, I remember, I heard, years ago that Call of Cthulhu was the most popular Western RPG in Japan. And it's because Japanese women are really into Call of Cthulhu, which makes sense because historically, the horror genre has usually been something that women are really into. Women tend to be really into the horror genre, which is really interesting to me. I think it's because women tend to be the protagonist characters in a lot of horror stories. Nope, no says Millennium 1 D&D will stick just as much as D&D Next did. Ha! Yes, it might indeed. Nope, no, it might indeed. Honestly, I feel like the 1 D&D switchover has been completely mismanaged by Wizards of the Coast. It feels like a poisoned chalice at this stage. I think that they were expecting everyone to be super hyped, and it's kind of gone down like a lead balloon at this stage. It's gone down like a lead balloon. Thank you very much for the $5 donation there, Mark Spooner. I really appreciate that. Peter Ron, thank you very much for the Canadian $2 donation. Says, go on, tell us what you think about the open game license situation. Well, I mean, I think I have spent like the last 2 hours going on, but the general gist of the open game license, in my opinion, is basically this. We don't know how far it can go. We don't know how bad it's going to be. This will need to be settled up in a court case. I think this is really bad. I think it speaks to the intentions of Wizards of the Coast that they want to shut down third parties. I think that's really, really bad. I think they should be condemned for that. I think they should walk it back, but even if they do, I think we should remember the fact that they tried to get away with this, and I think that is really super duper lame. And I think that as a community, we should try some other games. I think that we should take this as an opportunity to support some other creators, and remember that this was what Wizards of the Coast really wanted to do. But all the same, I do think the Wizards of the Coast need to walk this back because it's really, really bad. I think that it is cutting off their nose to spite their own face, honestly. I think that is an act of hubris that will end up biting them in the ass in the end, whether or not they succeed or not, whether or not this OGL goes through or not. So yeah, Unibutton, thank you very much for the $5 Canadian. Says, I thought for sure you were going to say women are into tentacles. No, I've only seen, I mean, for some reason, it seems to be a trope, doesn't it, though? Ever since that famous with the fisherman's wife, you know, with the Japanese woman hanging out by the shore is basically the only way I can say without YouTube shutting me down immediately. But for sure, it seems to be a trope. Whoever is writing the Call of Cthulhu stories and is in charge of the Cthulhu IP seems to have a thing for tentacles for sure. And because there's no one person in charge of the IP, because it's open source, because it's Creative Commons, means that there's a lot of people really into tentacles out there, so that's something to think about. That is the true horror that Lovecraft left us with. Jean Vera says, horror in general is big in Japan, lots of horror movies, manga, and anime. Yeah, I love horror, it's my favorite genre, and I love a lot of Japanese horror stuff. Pian Cabal, $2 Canadian, says, Mothership is Cthulhu plus aliens, check, Kickstarter. Yes, I have played that game. I played it literally last night. If you want to see me play it with the gaming materialists, It's over there on their YouTube, and it was really awesome. I had a ton of. I was totally converted over to it. I was totally 100% converted over to it. I found it loads and loads of fun. The Alien game from Free Leaks is fun as well, says KL Forbes. I really want to try that too. I dig the Alien setting. I love my kind of oppressive corporations, dystopian future horror, because I mean I guess it's getting a little bit too real, but at least in Aliens they have cassette tapes, you know. Cry Havoc Wargaming, thank you very much for the $5 donation there. I really appreciate it. Cry Havoc Wargaming has a wargaming channel you also check out. It's a lot of fun. I actually watch his content very frequently. So thank you very much for the donation. Crypto Kev, thank you very much for the $10 donation. Says, were you fired from the American company by LARPing furry bards in the lunch break room? Being English, living in the US, they all think I am Australian. I did not get fired. I actually left because of YouTube. I actually left to pursue content creation full time. Some would say it was a mistake, but I think that it has been tough and stressful. But thanks to Patreon and stuff like that, I'm able to do it full time, which is just crazy to me, which is just like a dream come true. But I was not fired. I would love to say that LARPing as a furry bard in the lunch break room was how I got fired, but it wasn't. I think I was trying to proselytize too many obscure war games to them and saying like, you like Beastman? Well, you might like One Piece Rules. One too many times before they were like, you have to get out of here, Discourse. Goblin Twink is back, says that and the name of his cat. Goblin Twink. What a name. Can we all appreciate the name Goblin Twink for a hot little second? Ty Lasani says, Discourse Minis, there is a motion tracker add-on for the Foundry VTT to use in the Alien RPG set. I am sold. Give me this now. I need this in my life. If even just to walk around my house and freak myself out. Turn off all the lights and walk around with your motion tracker on. How cool is that? I love the iconic Aliens like motion tracker sound. It is so cool. It is so cool. In the game of Mothership last night, Jing, the games master, had a bunch of like sound effects and had like a bunch of voice filters so that he could sound like a tannoy system and like a kind of a generic kind of British voice, letting us know that the vac suit was running out of oxygen immediately and to please repair at your earliest the convenience. That was a ton of fun. I love all that. Cynthia Mullet, thank you very much for the £2 donation. Says, Kobold, eat my babies! RPG. All hail King Torg. I think on those delightful notes, I think we will begin to close out tonight. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much to everybody who donated. Thank you everybody who chatted. Thank you to everybody who is just watching on the stream. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much, guys. If you do want to support the channel through Patreon, you want to get bonus videos and things like that, do check out patreon.com/subscribesmanaged. And yeah, thanks very much. Please check out, if you're interested in RPG content, check out my channel, Dungeons and Discourse. It's Dungeons and Discourse. Type that in, you'll probably get it. Peter Rand says, as previously, hoping for a Nordy situation. I actually don't know what's a Nordy situation? What is that? But thank you very much for the $2 Canadian donation there, Peter. But what now everyone's saying all hail King Torg. I don't know what's going on. My chat's being taken over by some sort of monarchist situation. What's happening here? Goblin Twink says, great stream, everyone. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much, guys. And yeah, Kabuki Kid says it best. Have a great one, gamers. I'll see you all. All hail the Goblin Twinks. Thank you very much, guys. I had a ton of fun. Thank you for joining me today. And look to there'll be a new video on the OGL next week, and then probably a video after that talking about all these different game systems. Recommending some game systems.